In this course, I'm going to take you from a complete beginner to building powerful no-code AI agents. I don't have any coding experience, and you don't need any either. In the past 8 months, I've made over $500,000 in revenue by building and teaching people how to build AI agents. In this video together, we're going to set up your 2-week free end-to-end trial. We're going to set up credentials together and walk through step-by-step builds. And by the end, you'll have over 15 AI automations ready to take advantage of this opportunity. All right, so here is a quick look at the high-level course agenda. Keep in mind, everything will be time-stamped below, so you can jump around to where you need, but I definitely recommend saving this for later. As you can see, this is extremely comprehensive, packed with a ton of value, so you can come back to this later when you want to explore different chapters. But what we're gonna do is start off with talking about AI agents and the opportunity that we are all living in right now. Then we'll move into end-to-end foundations. I'll set up a free 2-week trial with you guys. I will talk about the UI, we'll get familiar with it, and go over some foundational knowledge you'll need. From there, we'll move into step-by-step workflows where we're actually using that knowledge and connecting to different integrations and setting up some pretty cool automations right away. Then we'll talk about APIs and HTTP requests. We'll set up a few common examples together, and you'll see it's not that difficult. Then moving into the back half of the course, we'll talk about AI agent tools and memory. We will discuss multi-agent architectures. I'll talk about prompting, do a live example, and some other cool tips that I want to share with you guys that could be helpful. We will look at webhooks, what those really mean, and then we'll look at a few example workflows where we've triggered them with webhooks. I'll talk about MCP servers, what that really is, and we'll do a step-by-step self-hosted setup of end-to-end and connect to some MCP servers. And finally, we'll close off with lessons from my first 6 months of building AI agents. So if that all sounds good to you guys, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so AI agents, artificial intelligence, whatever it is, there is definitely a lot of hype. There's no denying that. And so the purpose of this section is just to make sure we can cut through all of that and actually understand what is an AI agent at its core, what can they do, and why do we need them? You probably heard, digital employee or virtual assistant, all this kind of stuff, but we need to understand what that actually means and what powers them. So at this point, I'm sure we are all familiar with something like ChatGPT, which is a large language model at its core. And so what we're looking at right here is a very simple visualization of how a large language model works, meaning right here in green, we have a large language model, let's say it's ChatGPT, and we, the user, give it some sort of input. So maybe that's like, hey, help me write an email to John. The LLM would then take our input, process this, it would basically just create an email for us, and then it would spit that out as an output, and that's it. This LLM at its core cannot take any action. It's really not that practical. It just kind of helps you be more productive. Because at the end of the process, we'd have to take this output and copy and paste it into something that actually can take action, like Gmail. And so the power of these large language models really comes into play when we start to expose them to different tools. And tools just means any of these integrations that we use every single day within our work that let us actually do something. So whether that's send an email or update a row in our CRM or look at a database, or Airtable, whatever it is, even Outlook, that's a tool. It just means connecting to an actual platform that we use to do something. So now instead of having the LLM help us write an email that we would copy and paste, or us exporting a Google Sheet and giving it to an LLM to analyze, it can basically just interact with any of its tools that we give it access to. So when we add an LLM to tools, we basically can get 2 different things, and that is either an AI workflow or an AI agent. So right away, you can already tell what the difference is, but you can also see some similarities. So let's break it down. Starting with an AI workflow, we can see that we have an input, similar to like we did up top with our LLM. But now instead of just going input, LLM, output, we can work in those tools right into the actual AI workflow itself. So here is an example of what an AI workflow could practically look like. First of all, we have a tool, which is HubSpot, and that's going to be the input for this workflow. This will basically pass over a new lead that has been inserted into our CRM. Then we're hitting another tool, which is Perplexity, which helps us do research. So we're going to do research on that lead. From there, after we get that research, we're going to hit an LLM, which is where this whole AI-powered workflow terminology comes in, because we're using that LLM to then take the research, draft a personalized email, and then it can use another tool to actually send that email. And the reason that we do this as a workflow is because this is going to happen in the same 4 steps in that order every time. New lead comes in, research, write the personalized email, send the email. And so whenever we know a process is linear or sequential or it's going to follow that order every time, it's much, much better to do an actual workflow rather than send that off to an AI agent, where we have an input, we have the LLM, which is the AI agent, this is the brain of the whole operation, and it has access to all of the different tools it can use, and then it has an output. So yes, it is true that this AI agent down here could do the exact same job as this AI workflow. We could also over here with an AI agent get a new form and have a new row in our CRM. The agent could then think about it and decide, okay, I'm going to use Perplexity to do research, and then after that, I'm going to send an email with my email tool. But it's not the most effective way to do it because it's going to be more expensive, it's going to be slower, and it's going to be more error prone. So basically the whole idea is AI agents can make decisions and act autonomously based on different inputs. AI workflows follow the guardrails that we put in place. There's no way they can deviate off the path that we chose for them. So a big part of building effective systems is understanding, okay, do I need to build an AI workflow or am I going to build an AI agent? Is this process deterministic or non-deterministic? Or in other words, is it predictable or is it unpredictable? If something's unpredictable, that's when we're going to use an AI agent with a brain and with different tools to actually do the job, and that's where the whole autonomy comes into play. And I don't want to dive too deep into the weeds of this right now. We'll cover this later in a different section. But real quick, 4 main pros of AI workflows over AI agents: reliability and consistency, cost efficiency, easier debugging and maintenance, and scalability. Once again, we have a whole section dedicated to this idea, and we're going to dive into it after we build out a few AI workflows. But I wanted you guys to understand this because obviously the whole purpose you probably came here was to learn how to build AI agents. But before we build AI agents, we're going to learn how to build AI workflows. It's the whole concept of crawl, walk, run. You wouldn't just start running right away. And trust me, after you've built out a few AI workflows, it's going to make a lot more sense when you hop into building some more complex agentic systems. But just to give you that quick fix of AI agent knowledge, and we'll revisit this later when we actually build our first agent together, what is the anatomy of an AI agent? What are the different parts that make one up? So here's a simple diagram that I think illustrates AI agents as simple as possible. We have an input, we have our LLM, and we have our output, like we talked about earlier. But then inside the AI agent, you can see 2 main things. We have a brain and we have instructions. So the first thing is a brain. This comes in the form of a large language model and also memory. So first off, the large language model, this is an AI chat model that we'll choose. Whether that's an OpenAI model or an Anthropic model or a Google model, this is going to be what powers the AI agent to make decisions, to reason, to generate outputs, that sort of stuff. And then we also have the memory. So this can come in the form of long-term memory as well as short-term memory, but basically we want to make sure that if we're conversating with our agent, it's not going to forget what we're talking about after every single sentence. It's going to retain that context window, and it can also remember things that we talked about a while back. And then the other piece is the instructions for the AI agent, which is also kind of referred to as a system prompt. And this is really important because this is telling this AI agent, here's your role, here's what you do, here are the tools you have. This is basically like your job description. So the same way you wouldn't expect a new hire to hop into the company and just start using its different tools and knowing what to do, you would have to give it basically some pretty specific training on this is basically your end goal, here are the tools you have, and here's when you use each one to get the job done. And the system prompt is different than the input, which is kind of referred to as a user prompt. And think of it like this. When you're talking to ChatGPT in your browser and every single message that you're typing and sending off to it is a user message because that input changes every time. It's dynamic. But the system prompt is typically going to stay the same over the course of this agent's life unless its role or actual instructions are going to change. But anyways, let's say the input is, hey, can you help me send an email to John? What's going to happen is the agent's going to use its brain to understand the input. It's going to check its memory to see if there's any other interactions that would help with this current input. Then it will look at its instructions and see, okay, how do I actually send an email to John? And then it will call on its tool to actually send an email. So at a high level, that is the anatomy of an AI agent, and I hope that helps paint a clear picture in your mind. Cool. So now that we've talked about what an AI agent is and what a workflow is and why we want to walk before we run, let's actually get into N8N and start building some stuff. All right, so before we dive into actually building AI agents, I want to share some eye-opening research that underscores exactly why you're making such a valuable investment in yourself today. This research report that I'm going to be walking through real quick will be available for free in my school community if you want to go ahead and take a look at it. It's got a total of 48 sources that are all from within the past year, so you know it's real, you know it's relevant, and it was completely generated for me using Perplexity, which is an awesome AI tool. So, just a year ago, AI was still considered experimental technology for most businesses. Now, it's become the core driver of competitive advantage across every industry and business size. What we're witnessing isn't just another tech trend, it's a fundamental business transformation. Let me start with something that might surprise you. 75% of small businesses now use AI tools. That's right, this isn't just enterprise technology anymore. In fact, the adoption rates are climbing fastest among companies generating just over $1 million in revenue at 86%. What's truly remarkable is the investment threshold. The median annual AI investment for small businesses is just $1,800. That's less than $150 per month to access technology that was science fiction just a few years ago. Now, I know some of you might be skeptical about AI's practical value. Let's look at concrete outcomes businesses are achieving. Marketing teams are seeing a 22% increase in ROI for AI-driven campaigns. Customer service AI agents have reduced response time by 60% while resolving 80% of inquiries without human intervention. Supply chains optimized with AI have cut transportation costs by 5 to 10% through better routing and demand forecasting. These are actual measured results from implementations over the past year. Now, for those of you from smaller organizations, consider these examples. Henry's House of Coffee used AI-driven SEO tools to improve their product descriptions, resulting in a 200% improvement in search rankings and a 25% revenue increase. Vanasek Insurance implemented custom chatbots that cut client query resolution time from 48 hours to just 15 minutes. Small businesses using Zapier automations saved 10 to 15 hours weekly on routine data entry and CRM updates. What's revolutionary here is that none of these companies needed to hire AI specialists or data scientists to achieve these results. The economic case for AI skills is compelling. 54% of small and medium businesses plan to increase AI spending this year. 83% of enterprises now prioritize AI literacy in their hiring decisions. Organizations with AI-trained teams are seeing 5 to 8% higher profitability than their peers. But perhaps most telling is this: small businesses using AI report 91% higher revenue growth than non-AI adopters. That gap is only widening. So the opportunity ahead. The truth is, mastering AI is no longer optional. It's becoming the price of entry for modern business competitiveness. Those who delay risk irrelevance while early adopters are already reaping the benefits of efficiency, innovation, and market share gains. Now, the good news is that we're still in the early stages. By developing these skills now, you're positioning yourself at the forefront of this transformation and going to be in extremely high demand over the next decade. So let's get started building your first AI agent. All right, so here we are on n8n's website. You can get here using the link in the description. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and sign up for a free trial with you guys. And this is exactly the process you're going to take. And you're going to get 2 weeks of free playing around. And like I said, by the end of those 2 weeks, you're already going to have automations up and running and tons of templates imported into your workflows. And I'm not going to spend too much time here, but basically n8n just lets you automate anything. Any business process that you have, you can automate it visually with no code, which is why I love it. So here you can see n8n lets you automate business processes without limits on your logic. It's a very visual builder. We have a ton of different integrations. We have the ability to use code if you want to. Lots of native nodes to do data transformation, and we have tons of different triggers, tons of different AI nodes, and we're going to dive into this so you can understand what's all going on. But there's also hundreds of templates to get you started, not only on the n8n website itself, but also in my free school community. I have almost 100 templates in there that you can plug in right away. Anyways, let's scroll back up to the top and let's get started here with a new account. All right, so I put in my name, my email, password, and I give my account a name, which will basically be up in the top search bar. It'll be like nateherkdemo.app.n8n.cloud. So that's what your account name means. And you can see I'm going to go ahead and start our 14-day free trial. Just have to do some quick little onboarding. So it asks us what type of team are we on. I'm just going to put product and design. It asks us the size of our company. It's going to ask us which of these things do we feel most comfortable doing. These are all pretty technical. I just want to put none of them, and that's fine. And how did you hear about n8n? Let's go ahead with YouTube and submit that off. And now you have the option to invite other members to your workspace if you want to collaborate and share some credentials. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and skip that option. So from here, our workspace is already ready. There's a little quick start guide you could watch from n8n's YouTube channel, but I'm just going to go ahead and click on Start Automating. All right, so here we are. This is what n8n looks like, and let's just familiarize with this dashboard a little bit real quick. So up in the top left, we can see we have 14 days left in our free trial, and we've used 0 out of 1,000 executions. An execution just basically means when you run a workflow from end to end, that's going to be an execution. So we can see on the left-hand side, we have overview. We have like a personal set of projects. We have things that have been shared with us. We have the ability to add a project. We have the ability to go to our admin panel where we can upgrade our instance of n8n. We can turn it off, that sort of stuff. So here's my admin panel. You can see how many executions I have, how many active workflows I have, which I'll explain what that means later. We have the ability to go ahead and manage our n8n versions, and this is where you could kind of upgrade your plan and change your billing information, stuff like that. But you'll notice that I didn't even have to put any billing details to get started with my 2-week free trial. But then if I want to get back in my workspace, I'm just going to click on open right here, and that will send us right back into this dashboard that we were just on. Cool. So right here we can see we can either start from scratch, a new workflow, or we can test a simple AI agent example. So let's just click into here real quick and break down what is actually going on here. So in order for us to actually access this demo where we're going to just talk to this AI agent, it says that we have to start by saying hi. So there's an open chat button down here. I'm going to click on open chat and I'm just going to type in here, hi. And what happens is our AI agent fails because this is basically the brain that it needs to use in order to think about our message and respond to us. And what happens is we can see there's an error message. So because these things are red, I can click into it and I can see what is the error. It says error in subnode OpenAI model. So that would be this node down here, which is called OpenAI model. I would click into this node and we can basically see that the error is there is no credentials. So when you're in n8n, what happens is in order to access any sort of API, which we'll talk about later, but in order to access something like your Gmail or OpenAI or your CRM, you always need to import some sort of credential, which is just a fancy word for a password, in order to actually get into that information. So right here we can see there's 100 free credits from OpenAI. I'm going to click on claim credits, and now we just are using our n8n free OpenAI API credits, and we're fine on this front. But don't worry, later in this video I'm going to cover how we can actually go to OpenAI and get an API key and create our own password in here. But for now, we've claimed 100 free credits, which is great. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and resend this message that says hi. So I can actually go to this hi text and I can just click on this button, which says repost message. And that's just going to send it off again. And now our agent's going to actually be able to use its brain and respond to us. So what it says here is, welcome to n8n. Let's start with the first step to give me memory. Click the plus button on the AI agent that says memory and choose simple memory. Just tell me once you've done that. So sure, why not? Let's click on the plus button under memory and we'll click on simple memory real quick. And we're already set up, good to go. So now I'm just going to come down here and say done. Now we can see that our agent was able to use its memory and its brain in order to respond to us. So now it can prompt us to add tools, it can do this other stuff, but we're going to break that down later in this video. Just wanted to show you a real quick demo of how this works. So what I would do is up in the top right, I can click on save just to make sure that what we've done is actually going to be saved. And then to get back out to the main screen, I'm going to click on either overview or personal. But if I click on overview, that just takes us back to that home screen. But now let's talk about some other stuff that happens in a workflow. So up in the top right, I'm going to click on create workflow. You can see now this opens up a new blank page, and then you have the option up here in the top left to name it. So I'm just going to call this one demo. Now we have this new workflow that's saved in our n8n environment called demo. So a couple things before we actually drag in any nodes is up here you can see where is this saved. If you have different projects, you can save workflows in those projects. If you want to tag them, you can tag different things, like if you have one for customer support or you have stuff for marketing, you can give your workflows different tags just to keep everything organized. But anyways, every single workflow has to start off with some sort of trigger. So when I click on add first step, it opens up this panel on the right that says what triggers this workflow. So we can have a manual trigger, we can have a certain event like a new message in Telegram or a new row in our CRM. We can have a schedule, meaning we can set this to run at 6 a.m. every single day. We can have a webhook call, form submission, chat message like we saw earlier. There's tons of ways to actually trigger a workflow. So for this example, let's just say I'm going to click on trigger manually, which literally just gives us this button where if we click test workflow, it goes ahead and executes. Cool, so this is a workflow and this is a node, but this is a trigger node. What happens after a trigger node is different types of nodes, whether that's like an action node or a data transformation node or an AI node, some sort of node. So what I would do is if I want to link up a node to this trigger, I would click on the plus button right here, and this pulls up a little panel on the right that says what happens next. Do you want to take action with AI? Do you want to take action within a certain app? Do you want to do data transformation? There's all these other different types of nodes. And what's cool is, let's say we wanted to take action within an app. If I clicked on this, we can see all of the different native integrations that n8n has. And once again, in order to connect to any of these tons of different tools that we have here, you always need to get some sort of password. So let's say Google Drive. Now that I've clicked into Google Drive, there's tons of different actions that we can take, and they're all very intuitive. You know, would you want to copy a file? Would you want to share a file? Do you want to create a shared drive? It's all very natural language. And let's say, for example, I want to copy a file. In order for n8n to tell Google Drive which file do we want to copy, we first of all have to provide a credential. So every app, you'll have to provide some sort of credential. And then you have basically like a configuration panel right here in the middle, which would be saying, what is the resource you want? What do you want to do? What is the file? All this kind of stuff. So whenever you're in a node in n8n, what you're going to have is on the left, you have an input panel, which is basically any data that's going to be feeding into this current node. In the middle, you'll have your configuration, which is like the different settings and the different little levers you can tweak in order to do different things. And then on the right is going to be the output panel of what actually comes out of this node based on the way that you configured it. So every time you're looking at a node, you're going to have three main places: input, configuration, and output. So let's just do a quick example where I'm going to delete this Google Drive node by clicking on the delete button. I'm going to add an AI node because there's a ton of different AI actions we can take as well. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk to OpenAI's kind of like ChatGPT. So I'll click on that, and I'm just going to click on message a model. So once that pulls up, we're going to be using our end-to-end free OpenAI credits that we got earlier. And as you can see, we have to configure this node. What do we want to do? The resource is going to be text. It could be image, audio, assistant, whatever we want. The operation we're taking is we want to just message a model. And then, of course, because we're messaging a model, we have to choose from this list of OpenAI models that we have access to. And actually, it looks like this end-to-end free credits only actually give us access to a chat model. And this is a bit different. Not exactly sure why, probably just because they're free credits. So what we're going to do real quick is head over to OpenAI and get a credential so I can just show you guys how this works with input, configuration, and output. So basically, you'd go to openai.com, you'd come in here and you'd create an account if you don't already have one. If you have a ChatGPT account and you're on like maybe the $20 a month plan, that is different than creating an OpenAI API account. So you'd come in here and create an OpenAI account. As you see up here, we have the option for ChatGPT login or API platform login, which is what we're looking for here. So now that you've created an account with OpenAI's API, what you're going to do is come up to your dashboard and you're going to go to your API keys. And then all you'd have to do is click on create new key, name this one whatever you want, and then you have a new secret key. But keep in mind, in order for this key to work, you have to have put in some billing information in your OpenAI account. So throw in a few bucks, they'll go a lot longer than you may think. And then you're going to take that key that we just copied, come back into end-to-end, and under the credential section, we're going to click on create new credential. All I had to do now was paste in that API key right there. And then you have the option to name this credential if you have a ton of different ones. So I can just say, like demo on May 21st. And now I have my credential saved and named, because now we can tell the difference between our demo credential and our end-to-end free OpenAI credits credential. And now hopefully we have the ability to actually choose a model from the list. So as you can see, we can access ChatGPT 4.0 latest, 3.5 turbo, 4, 4.1 mini, all this kind of stuff. I'm going to choose 4.1 mini, but as you can see, you can come back and change this whenever you want. And I'm going to keep this really simple. In the prompt, I'm just going to type in, tell me a joke. So now when this node executes, it's basically just going to be sending this message to OpenAI's model, which is GPT 4.1 mini, and it's just going to say, tell me a joke. And then what we're going to get on the output panel is the actual joke. So what I can do is come up right here and click on test step. This is going to run this node, and then we get an output over here. And as you can see, both with the input and the output, we have three options of how we want to view our data. We can click on schema, we can click on table, or we can click on JSON. And this is all the exact same data. It's just like a different way to actually look at it. I typically like to look at schema. I think it just looks the most simple and natural language. But what you can see here is the message that we got back from this OpenAI model was, sure, here's a joke for you. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. And what's cool about schemas is that this is all drag and drop. So now once we have this output, we could basically just use it however we want. So if I click out of here and I open up another node after this, and for now, I'm just going to grab a set node just to show you guys how we can drag and drop. What I would do is, let's say we wanted to add a new field, and I'm just going to call this OpenAI's response. So we're creating a field called OpenAI's response. And as you can see, it says drag an input field from the left to use it here. So as we know, every node we have input, configuration, output. On the input, we can basically choose which one of these things do we want to use. I just want to reference this content, which is the actual thing that OpenAI said to us. So I would drag this from here right into the value, and now we can see that we have what's called a variable. So anything that's going to be wrapped in these two curly braces and it's going to be green is a variable, and it's coming through as json.message.content, which is basically just something that represents whatever's coming from the previous node in the field called content. So we can see right here, json.message.content. We have message. Within message, we have basically a subfolder called content, and that's where we access this actual result, this real text. And you can see if I click into this variable, if I make it full screen, we have an expression, which is our JSON variable, and then we have our result, which is the actual text that we want back. So now, if I go ahead and test this step, we can see that we only get output to us OpenAI's response, which is the text we want. Okay, so this would basically be a workflow because we have a trigger and then we have our nodes that are going to execute when we hit test workflow. So if I hit test workflow, it's going to run the whole thing. And as you can see, super visual. We saw that OpenAI was thinking, and then we come over here and we get our final output, which was the actual joke. And now let me show you one more example of how we can map our different variables without using a manual trigger. So let's say we don't want a manual trigger. I'm just going to delete that. But now we have no way to run this workflow because there's no sort of trigger. So I'm just going to come back in here and grab a chat trigger just so we can talk to this workflow in n8n. I'm going to hook it up right here. I would just basically drag this plus into the node that I want. So I just drag it into OpenAI, and now these two things are connected. So if I went into the chat and I said hello, it's going to run the whole workflow, but it's not really going to make sense because I said hello and now it's telling me a joke about why don't scientists trust atoms. So what I want to do is I'd want to come into this OpenAI node right here, and I'm just going to change the actual prompt. So rather than asking it to tell me a joke, what I would do is I'd just delete this. And what I want to do is I want OpenAI to go ahead and process whatever I type in this chat. Same way it would work if we were in ChatGPT in our browser, and whatever we type, OpenAI responds to. So all I'd have to do that is I would grab the chat input variable right here. I would drag that into the prompt section. And now if I open this up, it's looking at the expression called json.chatInput because this field right here is called chat input. And then the result is going to be whatever we type anytime, even if it's different 100 times in a row, it's always going to come back as a result that's different, but it's always going to be referenced as the same exact expression. So just to actually show you guys this, let's save this workflow. And I'm going to say, my name is Nate. I like to eat ice cream. Make up a funny story about me. Okay, so we'll send this off, and the response that we should get will be one that is actually about me, and it's going to have some sort of element of a story with ice cream. So let's take a look. So it said, sure, Nate, here's a funny story for you. And actually, because we're setting it, it's coming through a little weird. So let's actually click into here to look at it. Okay, so here is the story. Let me just make this a little bigger. I can go ahead and drag the configuration panel around by doing this. I can also make it larger or smaller if I do this. So let's just make it small. We'll move it all the way to the left, and let's read this story. So it said, sure, Nate, here's a funny story just for you. Once upon a time, there was a guy named Nate who loved ice cream more than anything else in the world. One day, Nate decided to invent the ultimate ice cream. A flavor so amazing that it would make the entire town go crazy. So let's skip ahead to the bottom. Basically what happens is, from that day on, Nate's stand became the funniest spot in town, a place where you never knew if you'd get a sweet, savory, or plain silly ice cream. And Nate, he became the legendary ice cream wizard. That sounds awesome. So that's exactly how you guys can see. What happened was, in this OpenAI node, we have a dynamic input, which was us talking to this thing in a chat trigger. We drag in that variable that represents what we type into the user prompt, and this is going to get sent to OpenAI's model of GPT 4.1 mini because we configured this node to do so. And the reason we were able to actually successfully do that is because we put in our API key or our password for OpenAI. And then on the right, we get this output, which we can look at either in schema view, table view, or JSON view, but they all represent the same data. As you can see, this is the exact story we just read. Something I wanted to talk about real quick that is going to be super helpful for the rest of this course is just understanding what is JSON. And JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And it's just a way to identify things. And the reason why it's so important to talk about is because over here, right, we all kind of know what schema is. It's just kind of like the way something's broken down. And as you can see, we have different drill downs over here, and we have different things to reference. Then we all understand what a table is. It's kind of like a table view of different objects with different things within them, kind of like the subfolders. And once again, you can also drag and drop from table view as well. And then we have JSON, which also you can drag and drop. Don't worry, you can drag and drop pretty much this whole platform, which is why it's awesome. But this may look a little more codey or intimidating, but I want to talk about why it is not. So first of all, JSON is so important because everything that we do is pretty much going to be built on top of JSON. Even the workflows that you're going to download later when you'll see like, hey, you can download this template for free. When you download that, it's going to be a JSON file, which means the whole workflow in n8n is basically represented as JSON. And so hopefully that doesn't confuse you guys. But what it is it's literally just key value pairs. So what I mean by that is like over here, the key is index and index equals 0. And then we have like the role of the OpenAI assistant, and that's the key. And the value of the role is assistant. So it's very, very natural language if you really break it down. What is the content that we're looking at? The content that we're looking at is this actual content over here. But like I said, the great thing about that is that pretty much every single large language model, or like ChatGPT, Claude 3.5, they're all trained on JSON and they all understand it so well because it's universal. So right here on the left, we're looking at JSON. If I was to just copy this entire JSON, go into ChatGPT and say, hey, help me understand this JSON. And then I just basically pasted that in there. It's going to be able to tell us exactly like which keys are in here and what those values are. So it says, this JSON represents the response from an AI model like ChatGPT in a structured format. Let me break it down for you. So basically it's going to explain what each part of this JSON means. We can see the index is 0. That means it's the first response. We can see the role equals assistant. We can see that the content is the funny story about Nate. We can see all this stuff, and it basically is able to not only break it down for us, but let's say we need to make JSON. We could say, hey, I have this natural language. Can you make that into JSON for me? Hey, can you help me make a JSON body where my name is Nate, I'm 23 years old, I went to the University of Iowa, I like to play pickleball. We'll send that off. And basically we'll be able to turn that into JSON for us. So here you go. We can see name, Nate, age 23, education, University of Iowa, interests, pickleball. And so don't let it overwhelm you. If you ever need help either making JSON or understanding JSON, throw it into chat and it will do a phenomenal job for you. And actually, just to show you guys that I'm not lying, let's just copy this JSON that chat gave us, go back into our workflow, and I'm just gonna add a set field just to show you guys. And instead of manual mapping, I'm just going to set some data using JSON. So I'm going to delete this, paste in exactly what chat gave me, hit test step, and what do we see over here? We see the name of someone named Nate, we see their age, we see their education, and we see their interests in either schema, table, or JSON view. So hopefully that gives you guys some reassurance. And just once again, JSON's super important, and it's not even code. That is just a really quick foundational understanding of a trigger, different nodes, action nodes, AI nodes. You have a ton to play with, and that's kind of like the whole most overwhelming part about n8n is you know what you need to do in your brain, but you don't know maybe which is the best n8n node to actually get that job done. So that's kind of the tough part. Is it's a lot of just getting the reps in, understanding what node is best for what, but I assure you by the time your 2-week trial is up, you'll have mastered pretty much all that. All right, but something else I want to show you guys is now what we're looking at is called the editor. So if you look at the top middle right here, we have an editor, and this is where we can, zoom out, we can move around, we can basically edit our workflow right here, and it moves from left to right, as you guys saw, the same way we read from left to right. And now, because we've done a few runs and we've tested out these different nodes, what we'll click into is executions. And this will basically show us the different times we've ran this workflow, and what's cool about this is it will show us the data that has moved through. So let's say you set up a workflow that every time you get an email, it's going to send some sort of automated response. You could come into this workflow, you could click on executions, and you could go look at what time they happened, what actually came through, what email was sent, all that kind of stuff. So if I go all the way down to this third execution, we can remember that what I did earlier was I asked this node to tell us a joke. We also had a manual trigger rather than a chat trigger, and we can see this version of the workflow. I could now click into this node and I could see this is when we had it configured to tell us a joke, and we could see the actual joke it told us, which was about scientists not trusting atoms. And obviously we can still manipulate this stuff, look at schema, look at table, and do the same thing on that left-hand side as well. So I wanted to talk about how you can import templates into your own n8n environment because it's super cool. And like I said, they're all kind of built on top of JSON. So I'm going to go to n8n's website and we're going to go to product and we're going to scroll down here to templates. And you can see there's over 2,100 workflow automation templates. So let's scroll down. Let's say we want to do this one with cloning viral TikToks with AI avatars. And we can use this one for free. So I'll click on use for free. And what's cool is we can either copy the template to clipboard, or since we're in the cloud workspace, we could just import it right away. And so this is logged into my other, kind of my main cloud instance, but I'll still show you guys how this works. I would click on this button. It would pull up this screen where I just get to set up a few things. So there's going to be different things we'd have to connect to. So you would basically just select your different credentials if you already had them set up. If not, you could create them right here. And then you would just basically be able to hit continue. And as this loads up, you see we have the exact template right there to play with. Or let's say you're scrolling on YouTube and you see just a phenomenal Nate Herc YouTube video that you want to play around with. All you have to do is go to my free school community and you will come into YouTube resources or search for the title of the video. And let's say you wanted to play with this shorts automation that I built. What you'll see right here is a JSON file that you'll have to download. Once you download that, you'll go back into n8n, create a new workflow, and then when you import that from file, if you click on this button right here, you can see the entire workflow comes in, and then all you're gonna have to do is follow the setup guide in order to connect your own credentials to these different nodes. All right, and then the final thing I wanted to talk about is inactive versus active workflows. So you may have noticed that none of our executions actually counted up from 0, and the reason is because this is counting active workflow executions. And if we come up here to the top right, we can see that we have the ability to make a workflow active, but it has to have a trigger node that requires activation. So real quick, let's say that we come in here and we want a workflow to start when we have a schedule trigger. So I would go to schedule and I would basically say, okay, I want this to go off every single day at midnight as we have here. And what would happen is while this workflow is inactive, it's only actually going to run if we hit test workflow and then it runs. But if we were to flick this on as active, now it says your scheduled trigger will now trigger executions on the schedule you have defined. These executions will not show up immediately in the editor, but you can see them in the execution list. So this is basically saying two things. It's saying now that we have the scheduled trigger set up to run at midnight, it's actually going to run at midnight because it's active. If we left this inactive, it would not actually run. And all it meant by the second part is if we were sitting in this workflow at midnight, we wouldn't see it execute and go spinning in green and red in live real time, but it would still show up as an execution. But if it's an active workflow, you just don't get to see them live visually running and spinning anymore. So that's the difference between an active workflow and an inactive workflow. Let's say you have a trigger that's like, let's say you have a HubSpot trigger where you want this basically to fire off the workflow whenever a new contact is created. So you'd connect to HubSpot and you would make this workflow active so that it actually runs if a new contact's created. If you left this inactive, even though it says it's going to trigger on new contact, it would not actually do so unless this workflow was active. So that's a super important thing to remember. All right, and then one last thing I want to talk about, which we're not going to dive into because we'll see examples later, is there is one more way that we can see data rather than schema, table, or JSON, and it's something called binary. So binary basically just means an image or maybe a big PDF or a Word doc or a PowerPoint file. It's basically something that's not explicitly text-based. So let me show you exactly what that might look like. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add another trigger into this workflow, and I'm going to click on tab. And even though it doesn't say like what triggers this workflow, we can still access different triggers. So I'm just going to type in form, and this is going to give us a form submission that basically is an n8n native form. And you can see there's an option at the bottom for triggers. So I'm going to click on this trigger. Now, basically what this pulls up is another configuration panel, but obviously we don't have an input because it's a trigger, but we are going to get an output. So anyways, let me just set up a quick example form. I'm just going to say, the title of this form is demo. The description is binary data. And now what happens if I click on test step, it's going to pull up this form. And as you can see, we haven't set up like any fields for people to actually submit stuff. So the only option is to submit. But when I hit submit, you can see that the node has been executed. And now there's actually data in here, submitted at with a timestamp, and then we have different information right here. So let me just show you guys, we can add a form element. And when I'm adding a form element, we can basically have this be, date, it can be a dropdown, it can be an email, it can be a file, it can be text. So real quick, I'm just going to show you an example where let's say we have a form where someone has to submit their name. We have the option to add a placeholder or make it required. And this isn't really the bulk of what I'm trying to show you guys. I just want to show you binary data. But anyways, let's say we're adding another field that's going to be a file. I'm just going to say file, and this will also be required. And now if I go ahead and hit test step, it's going to pull up a new form for us with a name parameter and a file parameter. So what I did is I put my name and I put in just a YouTube short that I had published, and you can see it's an MP4 file. So if I hit submit, we're going to get this data pulled into n8n, as you can see in the background. Just go ahead and watch. The form is going to actually capture this data. There you go, form submitted. And now what we see right here is binary data. So this is interesting, right? We still have our schema, we still have our table, we still have our JSON. But what this is showing us is basically, okay, the name that the person submitted was Nate. The file, here is some information about it as far as the name of it, the MIME type, and the size. But we don't actually access the file through table or JSON or schema view. The only way we can access a video file is through binary. And as you can see, if I clicked on view, it's my actual video file right here. And so that's all I really wanted to show you guys was when you're working with PDFs or images or videos, a lot of times they're going to come through as binary, which is a little confusing at first, but it's not too bad. And we will cover an example later in this tutorial where we look at a binary file and we process it. But as you can see now, if we were doing a next node, we would have schema, table, JSON, and binary. So we're still able to work with the binary, we're still able to reference it, but I just wanted to throw out there, when you see binary, don't get scared. It just basically means it's a different file type. It's not just text-based. Okay, so that's gonna do it for just kind of setting up the foundational knowledge and getting familiar with the dashboard and the UI a little bit. And as you move into these next tutorials, which are gonna be some step-by-steps, I'm gonna walk through every single thing with you guys, setting up different accounts with Google and something called Pinecone, and we'll talk about all this stuff step by step. But hopefully now it's going to be a lot better moving into those sections because you've seen, some of the input stuff and how you configure nodes and just like all this terminology that you may not have been familiar with, like JSON, JavaScript variables, workflows, executions, that sort of stuff. So like I said, let's move into those actual step-by-step builds, and I can assure you guys you're going to feel a lot more comfortable after you have built a workflow end to end. All right, we're going to talk about data types in N8N and what those look like. It's really important to get familiar with this before we actually start automating things and building agents and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is just pull in a set node. As you guys know, this just lets us modify, add, or remove fields. And it's very, very simple. We basically would just click on this to add fields. We can add the name of the field, we choose the data type, and then we set the value, whether that's a fixed value, which we'll be looking at here, or if we're dragging in some sort of variable from the left-hand side. But clearly right now we have no data incoming. We just have a manual trigger. So what I'm going to do is zoom in on the actual browser so we can examine this data on the output a bit bigger, and I don't have to just keep cutting back and forth with the editing. So as you can see, there's 5 main data types that we have access to in N8N. We have string, which is basically just a fancy name for a word. As you can see, it's represented by a little A, a letter A. Then we have a number, which is represented by a pound sign or a hashtag, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty self-explanatory. Then we have a Boolean, which is basically just going to be true or false. That's basically the only thing it can be, represented by a little checkbox. We have an array, which is just a fancy word for list, and we'll see exactly what this looks like. And then we have an object, which is probably the most confusing one, which basically means it's just this big block, which can have strings in them, numbers in them, it can have Booleans in them, it can have arrays in them, and it can also have nested objects within objects. So we'll take a look at that. Let's just start off real quick with the string. So let's say a string would be a name, and that would be my name. So if I hit test step, on the right-hand side in the JSON, it comes through as a key value pair, like we talked about. Name equals Nate. Super simple. You can tell it's a string because right here we have 2 quotes around the word Nate. So that represents a string. Or you could go to the schema and you could see that with name equals Nate, there's the little letter A. And that basically says, okay, this is a string. As you see, it matches up right here. Cool. So that's a string. Let's switch over to a number. Now we'll just say we're looking at age, and we'll throw in the number 50, hit test step, and now we see age equals 50 with the pound sign right here as the symbol in the schema view. Or if we go to JSON view, we have the key value pair age equals 50, but now there are no double quotes around the actual number. It's green, so that's how we know it's not a string. This is a number. And that's where you may run into some issues where if you had like age coming through as a string, you wouldn't be able to like do any summarizations or filters. Like if age is greater than 50, send it off this way. If it's less than 50, send it that way. In order to do that type of filtering and routing, you would need to make sure that age is actually a number variable type or data type. Cool. So there's age. Let's go to a Boolean. So we're going to basically just say adult, and that can only be true or false. You see, I don't have the option to type anything here. It's only going to be false or it's only going to be true. And as you can see, it'll come through. It'll look like a string, but there's no quotes around it. It's green, and that's how we know it's a Boolean. Or we could go to schema, and we can see that there's a checkbox rather than the letter A symbol. Now we're going to move on to an array. And this one's interesting, right? So let's just say we want to have a list of names. So if I have a list of names, and I was typing in my name, and I tried to hit test step, this is where you would run into an error because it's basically saying, okay, the field called names, which we set right here, it's expecting to get an array, but all we got was Nate, which is basically a string. So to fix this error, change the type for the field names or you can ignore type conversions, whatever. So if we were to come down to the option and ignore type conversions, so when we hit ignore type conversions and tested the step, it basically just converted the field called names to a string because it just could understand that this was a string rather than an array. So let's turn that back off and let's actually see how we could get this to work if we wanted to make an array. So like we know, an array just is a fancy word for a list. And in order for us to actually send through an NNN and say, okay, this is a list, we have to wrap it in square brackets like this, but we also have to wrap each item in the list in quotes. So I have to go like this and go like that. And now this would pass through as a list of different strings, and those are names. And so if I wanted to add another one, after the first item, I would put a comma, I put 2 quotes, and then inside that I could put another name, hit test step. And now you can see we're getting this array that's made up of different strings, and they're all going to be different names. So I could expand that, I could close it out, we could drag in different names. And in JSON, what that looks like is we have our key, and then we have 2 close brackets, which is basically exactly what, like right here, this is exactly what we typed right here. So that's how it's being represented within these square brackets right here. Okay, cool. So the final one we have to talk about is an object, and this one's a little more complex. So if I was to hit test step here, it's going to tell us names expects an object, but we got an array. So once again, you could come in here, ignore type conversions, and then it would just basically come through as a string, but it's not coming through as an array. So that's not how we want to do it. And I don't want to mess with the actual like schema of typing in an object. So what I'm going to do is go to chat. I literally just said, give me an example JSON object to put into NNN. It gives me this example JSON object. I'm going to copy that, come into the set node, and instead of manual mapping, I'm just going to customize it with JSON, paste the one that chat just gave us. And when I hit test step, what we now see, first of all in the schema view, is we have one item with, this is an object, and all this different stuff makes it up. So we have a string, which is name Nate Herc. We have a string, which is email nate@example.com. We have a string, which is company, True Horizon AI. Then we have an array of interests within this object. So I could close this out, I could open it up, and we have 3 interests: AI automation, NNN, and YouTube content. And this is, ChatGPT's long-term memory about me making this. And then we also have an object within our object, which is called project. And the interesting difference here with an object or an array is that when you have an array of interests, every single item in that array is going to be called interest 0, interest 1, interest 2. And by the way, this is 3 interests, but computers start counting from 0, so that's why it says 0, 1, 2. But with an object, it doesn't all have to be the same thing. So you can see in this project object, we have one string called title, we have one string called status, and we have one string called deadline. And this all makes up its own object, as you can see. If we went to table view, this is literally just one item that's really easy to read, and you can tell that this is an array because it goes 0, 1, 2, and you can tell that this is an object because it has different fields in it. This is one item, it's one object, it's got strings up top, it has no numbers actually, so the date right here, this is coming through as a string variable type. We can tell because it's not green, we can tell because it has double quotes around it, and we can also tell because in schema it comes through with the letter A. But this is just how you can see there's these different things that make up this object, and you can even close them down in JSON view. We can see interest is an array that has 3 items. We could open that up. We can see project is an object because it's wrapped in curly braces, not the closed square brackets, as you can see. So there's a difference, and I know this wasn't super detailed, and it's just something really, really important to know heading into when you actually start to build stuff out, because you're probably going to get some of those errors where you're like, blank expects an object but got this, or expects an array and got this. So just wanted to make sure I came in here and threw that module at you guys, and hopefully it'll save you some headaches down the road. Real quick guys, if you want to be able to download all the resources from this video, they'll be available for free in my free school community, which will be the link in the pinned comment. There'll be a zip file in there that has all 23 of these workflows, as you can see, and also 2 PDFs at the bottom, which are covered in the video. So like I said, join the free school community. Not only does it have all of my YouTube resources, but it's also a really quick growing community of people who are obsessed with AI automation and using NNN every day. All you'll have to do is search for the title of this video using the search bar, or you can click on YouTube resources and find the post associated with this video, and then you'll have the zip file right here to download, which once again is going to have all 23 of these JSON NNN workflows and 2 PDFs. And there may even be some bonus files in here. You'll just have to join the free school community to find out. Okay, so we talked about AI agents, we talked about AI workflows, we've gotten into NNN and set up our account. We understand workflows, nodes, triggers, JSON, stuff like that, and data types. Now it's time to use all that stuff that we've talked about and start applying it. So we're gonna head into this next portion of this course, which is gonna be about step-by-step builds, where I'm gonna walk you through every single step live, and we'll have some pretty cool workflows set up by the end. So let's get into it. Today, we're gonna be looking at 3 simple AI workflows that you can build right now to get started learning N8N. We're gonna walk through everything step by step, including all of the credentials and the setups. So let's take a look at the 3 workflows we're gonna be building today. All right, the first one is gonna be a RAG pipeline and chatbot. And if you don't know what RAG means, don't worry, we're gonna explain it all. But at a high level, what we're doing is we're gonna be using Pinecone as a vector database. If you don't know what a vector database is, we'll break it down. We're gonna be using Google Drive, we're gonna be using Google Docs, and then something called Open Router, which lets us connect to a bunch of different AI models like OpenAI's models or Anthropic's models. The second workflow we're gonna look at is a customer support workflow that's kind of gonna be building off of the first one we just built. Because in the first workflow, we're gonna be putting data into a Pinecone vector database, and in this one, we're gonna use that data in there in order to respond to customer support related emails. So we'll already have had Pinecone set up, but we're gonna set up our credentials for Gmail, and then we're also gonna be using an N8N AI agent, as well as Open Router once again. And then finally, we're gonna be doing LinkedIn content creation. And in this one, we'll be using an N8N AI agent and Open Router once again, but we'll have 2 new credentials to set up. The first one being Tavily, which is gonna let us search the web. And then the second one will be Google Sheets, where we're going to store our content ideas, pull them in, and then have the content written back to that Google Sheet. So by the end of this video, you're gonna have 3 workflows set up, and you're gonna have a really good foundation to continue to learn more about N8N. You'll already have gotten a lot of credentials set up and understand what goes into connecting to different services. One of the trickiest being Google. So we'll walk through that step by step, and then you'll have it configured and you'll be good. And then from there, you'll be able to continuously build on top of these 3 workflows that we're gonna walk through together, because there's really no such thing as a finished product in this space. Different AI models keep getting released and keep getting better. There's always ways to improve your templates. And the cool thing about building workflows in N8N is that you can make them super customized for exactly what you're looking for. So if this sounds good to you, let's hop into that first workflow. Okay, so for this first workflow, we're building a RAG pipeline and chatbot. And so if that sounds like a bunch of gibberish to you, let's quickly understand what RAG is and what a vector database is. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And in the simplest terms, let's say you ask me a question and I don't actually know the answer. I would just kind of Google it, and then I would get the answer from my phone, and then I would tell you the answer. So in this case, when we're building a RAG chatbot, we're gonna be asking the chatbot questions, and it's not gonna know the answer, so it's gonna look inside our vector database, find the answer, and then it's gonna respond to us. And so when we're combining the elements of RAG with a vector database, here's how it works. So the first thing we wanna talk about is actually what is a vector database. So essentially, this is what a vector database would look like. We're all familiar with like an X and Y axis graph where you can plot points on there on a 2-dimensional plane, but a vector database is a multi-dimensional graph of points. So in this case, you can see this multi-dimensional space with all these different points or vectors. And each vector is placed based on the actual meaning of the word or words in the vector. So over here, you can see we have wolf, dog, and cat, and they're placed similarly because the meaning of these words are all like animals. Whereas over here we have apple and banana, which the meaning of the words are food, more likely fruits, and that's why they're placed over here together. So when we're searching through the database, we basically vectorize a question the same way we would vectorize any of these other points. And in this case, we were asking for a kitten, and then that query gets placed over here near the other animals, and then we're able to say, okay, well, we have all these results now. So what that looks like, and what we'll see when we get into N8N, is we have a document that we want to vectorize. We have to split the document up into chunks because we can't put like a 50-page PDF as one chunk. So it gets split up, and then we're gonna run it through something called an embeddings model, which basically just turns text into numbers, just as simple as that. And as you can see in this case, let's say we had a document about a company, we have company data, finance data, and marketing data, and they all get placed differently because they mean different things, and the context of those chunks are different. And then this visual down here is just kind of how an LLM, or in this case, this agent, takes our question, turns it into its own question. We vectorize that using the same embeddings model that we used up here to vectorize the original data. And then, because it gets placed here, it just grabs back any vectors that are nearest, maybe like the nearest 4 or 5, and then it brings it back in order to respond to us. So don't want to dive too much into this, don't want to overcomplicate it, but hopefully this all makes sense. Cool, so now that we understand that, let's actually start building this workflow. So what we're going to do here is we are going to click on Add First Step, because every workflow needs a trigger that basically starts the workflow. So I'm going to type in Google Drive, because what we're going to do is we are going to pull in a document from our Google Drive in order to vectorize it. So I'm going to choose a trigger which is on changes involving a specific folder, And what we have to do now is connect our account. As you can see, I'm already connected, but what we're gonna do is click on create new credential in order to connect our Google Drive account. And what we have to do is go get a client ID and a secret. So what we wanna do is click on open docs, which is gonna bring us to N8N's documents on how to set up this credential. We have a prerequisite, which is creating a Google Cloud account. So I'm gonna click on Google Cloud account and we're gonna set up a new project. Okay, so I just signed into a new account and I'm gonna set up a whole project and walk through the credentials with you guys. You'll click up here. You'll probably have something up here that says like new project, and then you'll click into new project. All we have to do now is name it, and you'll be able to start for free, so don't worry about that yet. So I'm just gonna name this one demo, and I'm going to create this new project. And now up here in the top right, you're gonna see that it's kind of spinning up this project, and then we'll move forward. Okay, so it's already done, and now I can select this project. So now you can see up here, I'm in my new project called demo. I'm gonna click on these 3 lines in the top left, and what we're gonna do first is go to APIs and services and click on enabled APIs and services. And what we wanna do is add the ones we need. And so right now, all I'm gonna do is add Google Drive, and you can see it's gonna come up with Google Drive API, and then all we have to do is really simply click enable. And there we go, I just enabled it, so you can see here the status is enabled. And now we have to set up something called our OAuth consent screen, which basically is just going to let N8N know that Google Drive and N8N are allowed to talk to each other and have permissions. So right here, I'm gonna click on OAuth consent screen. We don't have one yet, so I'm gonna click on get started. I'm gonna give it a name, so we're just gonna call this one demo. Once again, I'm gonna add a support email. I'm gonna click on next. Because I'm not using a Google Workspace account, I'm just using a, nateherc88@gmail.com. I'm gonna have to choose external. I'm gonna click on next. For contact information, I'm putting the same email as I used to create this whole project. Click on next and then agree to terms, and then we're going to create that OAuth consent screen. Okay, so we're not done yet. The next thing we want to do is we want to click on audience, and we're going to add ourselves as a test user. So we could also make the app published by publishing it right here, but I'm just going to keep it in test. And when we keep it in test mode, we have to add a test user. So I'm going to put in that same email from before, and this is going to be the email of the Google Drive we want to access. So I put in my email, you can see I saved it down here, and then finally all we need to do is come back into here, go to clients, and then we need to create a new client. We're gonna click on web app. We're gonna name it whatever we want, of course. I'm just gonna call this one demo once again. And now we need to basically add a redirect URI. So if you click back into N8N, we have one right here. So we're gonna copy this, go back into cloud, and we're gonna add a URI and paste it right in there, and then hit create. And then once that's created, it's gonna give us an ID and a secret. So all we have to do is copy the ID, go back into N8N and paste that right here. And then we need to go grab our secret from Google Cloud and then paste that right in there. And now we have a little button that says sign in with Google. So I'm gonna open that up. It's gonna pull up a window to have you sign in. Make sure you sign in with the same account that you just had yourself as a test user, that one. And then you'll have to continue. And then here's basically saying like, what permissions do we have? Does N8N have to your Google Drive? So I'm just gonna select all. I'm gonna hit continue, and then we should be good. Connection successful, and we are now connected. And you may just wanna rename this credential so you know which email it is. So now I've saved my credential, and we should be able to access the Google Drive now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click on this list, and it's gonna show me the folders that I have in Google Drive. So that's awesome. Now for the sake of this video, I'm in my Google Drive, and I'm gonna create a new folder. So new folder, we're gonna call this one FAQ. Create this one because we're going to be uploading an FAQ document into it. So here's my FAQ folder right here. And then what I have is down here, I made a policy and FAQ document, which looks like this. We have some store policies, and then we also have some FAQs at the bottom. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in my policy and FAQ document into that new FAQ folder. And then if we come into N8N, we click on the new folder that we just made. So it's not here yet. I'm just going to click on these dots and click on refresh list. Now we should see the FAQ folder. There it is. Click on it. We're going to click on what are we watching this folder for. I'm going to be watching for a file created, and then I'm just going to hit fetch test event. And now we can see that we did in fact get something back. So let's make sure this is the right one. Yep, so there's a lot of nasty information coming through. I'm going to switch over here on the right hand side. This is where we can see the output of every node. I'm going to click on table, and I'm just going to scroll over, and there should be a field called file name. Here it is, name, and we have policy and FAQ document. So we know we have the right document in our Google Drive. Okay, so perfect. Every time we drop in a new file into that Google folder, it's going to start this workflow. And now we just have to configure what happens after the workflow starts. So all we want to do really is we want to pull this data into N8N so that we can put it into our Pinecone database. So off of this trigger, I'm going to add a new node, and I'm going to grab another Google Drive node, because what happened is basically we have the file ID and the file name, but we don't have the contents of the file. So we're going to do a download file node from Google Drive. I'm going to rename this one and just call it download file, just to keep ourselves organized. We already have our credential connected, and now it's basically saying, what file do you want to download? We have the ability to choose from a list, but if we choose from the list, it's going to be this file every time we run the workflow. And we want to make this dynamic. So we're going to change from list to by ID. And all we have to do now is we're going to look on the left-hand side for that file that we just pulled in, and we're going to be looking for the ID of the file. So I can see that I found it right down here in the spaces array, because we have the name right here and then we have the ID right above it. So I'm going to drag ID, put it right there in this folder. It's coming through as a variable called json.id, and that's just basically referencing, whenever a file comes through on the Google Drive trigger, I'm going to use the variable json.id, which will always pull in the file's ID. So then I'm going to hit test step, and we're going to see that we're going to get the binary data of this file over here that we could download, and this is our policy and FAQ document. Okay, so there's step 2. We have the file downloaded in N8N, and now it's just as simple as putting it into Pinecone. So before we do that, let's head over to pinecone.io. Okay, so now we are in pinecone.io, which is a vector database provider. You can get started for free, and what we're going to do is sign up. Okay, so I just got logged in, and once you get signed up, you should see a page similar to this. It's a get started page, and what we want to do is you want to come down here and click on begin setup, because we need to create an index. So I'm going to click on begin setup. We have to name our index, so you can call this whatever you want. We have to choose a configuration for a text model. We have to choose a configuration for an embeddings model, which is sort of what I talked about right in here. This is going to turn our text chunks into a vector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose text embedding 3 small from OpenAI. It's the most cost-effective OpenAI embedding model. So I'm going to choose that. Then I'm going to keep scrolling down. I'm going to keep mine as serverless. I'm going to keep AWS as the cloud provider. I'm going to keep this region. And then all I'm going to do is hit create index. Once you create your index, it'll show up right here, but we're not done yet. You're going to click into that index. And so I already obviously have stuff in my vector database. You won't have this. What I'm going to do real quick is just delete this information out of it. Okay, so this is what yours should look like. There's nothing in here yet. We have no namespaces, and we need to get this configured. So on the left-hand side, go over here to API keys, and you're going to create a new API key. Name it whatever you want, of course. Hit create key, and then you're going to copy that value. Okay, back in N8N, we have our API key copied. We're going to add a new node after the download file, and we're going to type in Pinecone, and we're going to grab a Pinecone vector store. Then we're going to select add documents to a vector store, and we need to set up our credential. So up here, you won't have these, and you're going to click on create new credential, and all we need to do here is just an API key. We don't have to get a client ID or a secret, so you're just going to paste in that API key. Once that's pasted in there and you've given it a name so you know what this means, you'll hit save, and it should go green, and we're connected to Pinecone. And you can make sure that you're connected by clicking on the index, and you should have the name of the index right there that we just created. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my index. I'm going to click on add option, and we're going to be basically adding this to a Pinecone namespace, which back in here in Pinecone, if I go back into my database, my index, and I click into here, you can see that we have something called namespaces. And this basically lets us put data into different folders within this one index. So if you don't specify an index, it'll just come through as default, and that's going to be fine. But we want to get into the habit of having our data organized. So I'm going to go back into N8N, and I'm just going to name this namespace FAQ, because that's the type of data we're putting in. And now I'm going to click out of this node. So you can see the next thing that we need to do is connect an embeddings model and a document loader. So let's start with the embeddings model. I'm going to click on the plus, and I'm going to click on embeddings OpenAI. And actually, this is one thing I left out of the Excalidraw, is that we also will need to go get an OpenAI key. So as you can see, when we need to connect a credential, you'll click on create new credential, and we just need to get an API key. So you're going to type in OpenAI API. You'll click on this first link here. If you don't have an account yet, you'll sign in. And then once you sign up, you want to go to your dashboard. And then on the left-hand side, very similar thing to Pinecone, you'll click on API keys. And then we're just going to create a new key. So you can see I have a lot. We're going to make a new one, and I'm calling everything demo, but this is going to be demo number 3. Create a new secret key. And then we have our key. So we're going to copy this, and we're going to go back into N8N, paste that right here. We paste it in our key. We've given it a name. And now we'll hit save, and we should go green. Just keep in mind that you may need to top up your account with a few credits in order for you to actually be able to run this model. So just keep that in mind. So then what's really important to remember is when we set up our Pinecone index, we use the embedding model text embedding 3small from OpenAI. So that's why we have to make sure this matches right here, or this automation is going to break. Okay, so we're good with the embeddings, and now we need to add a document loader. So I'm going to click on this plus right here. I'm going to click on default data loader, and we have to just basically tell Pinecone the type of data we're putting in. And so you have two options, JSON or binary. In this case, it's really easy because we downloaded a Google Doc, which is on the left-hand side. You can tell it's binary because up top right here on the input, we can switch between JSON and binary. And if we were uploading JSON, all we'd be uploading is this gibberish nonsense information that we don't need. We want to upload the binary, which is the actual policy and FAQ document. So I'm just going to switch this to binary. I'm going to click out of here. And then the last thing we need to do is add a text splitter. So this is where I was talking about back in this Excalidraw, we have to split the document into different chunks. And so that's what we're doing here with this text splitter. I'm going to choose a recursive character text splitter. There's three options, and I won't dive into the difference right now, but recursive character text splitter will help us keep context of the whole document as a whole, even though we're splitting it up. So for now, chunk size is 1,000. That's just basically how many characters am I going to put in each chunk? And then is there going to be any overlap between our chunks of characters? So right now, I'm just going to leave it default 1,000 and 0. So that's it. You just built your first automation for a RAG pipeline, and now we're just going to click on the play button above the Pinecone Vector Store node in order to see it get vectorized. So we're going to basically see that we have 4 items that have left this node. So this is basically telling us that our Google Doc that we downloaded right here, so this document, got turned into 4 different vectors. So if I click into the text splitter, we can see we have 4 different responses, and this is the contents that went into each chunk. So we can just verify this by heading real quick into Pinecone. We can see we have a new namespace that we created called FAQ. Number of records is 4. And if we head over to the browser, we can see that we do indeed have these 4 vectors. And then the text field right here, as you can see, are the characters that were put into each chunk. Okay, so that was the first part of this workflow, but we're gonna real quick just make sure that this actually works. So we're gonna add a RAG chatbot. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is hit the tab, or I could also have just clicked on the plus button right here, and I'm gonna type in AI agent, and that is what we're gonna grab and pull into this workflow. So we have an AI agent, and let's actually just put him right over here. And now what we need to do is we need to set up how are we actually gonna talk to this agent. And we're just gonna use the default N8N chat window. So once again, I'm gonna hit tab, I'm gonna type in chat, and we have a chat trigger. And all I'm gonna do is over here, I'm gonna grab the plus and I'm gonna drag it into the front of the AI agent. So basically now whenever we hit open chat and we talk right here, the agent will read that chat message. And we know this because if I click into the agent, we can see the user message is looking for one in the connected chat trigger node, which we have right here connected. Okay, so the first step with an AI agent is we need to give it a brain. So we need to give it some sort of AI model to use. So we're gonna click on the plus right below chat model. And what we could do now is we could set up an OpenAI chat model because we already have our API key from OpenAI. But what I wanna do is click on Open Router because this is going to allow us to choose from all different chat models, not just OpenAI's. So we could do Claude, we could do Google, we could do Perplexity. We have all these different models in here, which is gonna be really cool. And in order to get an Open Router account, all you have to do is go sign up and get an API key. So you'll click on create new credential and you can see we need an API key. So you'll head over to openrouter.ai, you'll sign up for an account, and then all you have to do is in the top right, you're gonna click on keys. And then once again, kind of the same as all the other ones, you're gonna create a new key, you're gonna give it a name, you're gonna click create, you have a secret key, you're gonna click copy, and then when we go back into N8N and paste it in here, give it a name and then hit save, and we should go green. We've connected to Open Router, and now we have access to any of these different chat models. So in this case, let's use Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And this is just to show you guys you can connect to different ones. But anyways, now we could click on Open Chat, and actually let me make sure you guys can see him. If we say hello, it's going to use its brain, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and now it responded to us, hi there, how can I help you? So just to validate that our information is indeed in the Pinecone Vector Store, we're gonna click on a tool under the agent. We're gonna type in Pinecone and grab a Pinecone Vector Store. And we're gonna grab the account that we just selected. So this was the demo I just made. We're gonna give it a name. So in this case, I'm just gonna say knowledge base. We're gonna give a description, call this tool to access the policy and FAQ database. So we're basically just describing to the agent what this tool does and when to use it. And then we have to select the index and the namespace for it to look inside of. So the index is easy. We only have one. It's called sample. But now this is important because if you don't give it the right namespace, it won't find the right information. So we called ours FAQ. If you remember in our Pinecone, we have a namespace and we have FAQ right here. So that's why we're doing FAQ. And now it's going to be looking in the right spot. So before we can chat with it, we have to add an embeddings model to our Pinecone vector store, which same thing as before, we're going to grab OpenAI and we're going to use embedding 3 small and the same credential you just made. And now we're going to be good to go to chat with our RAG agent. So looking back in the document, we can see we have some different stuff. So I'm going to ask this chatbot what the warranty policy is. So I'm going to open up the chat window and say, what is our warranty policy? Send that off, and we should see that it's going to use its brain as well as the vector store in order to create an answer for us because it didn't know by itself. So there we go, just finished up, and it said, based on the information from our knowledge base, here's the warranty policy. We have 1 year standard coverage. We have, this email for claims processes, you must provide proof of purchase, and for warranty exclusions that aren't covered, damage due to misuse, water damage, blah, blah, blah. Back in the policy documentation, we can see that that is exactly what we have in our knowledge base for warranty policy. So just because I don't want this video to go too long, I'm not going to do more tests, but this is where you can get in there and make sure it's working. One thing to keep in mind is within the agent, we didn't give it a system prompt. And what a system prompt is just basically a message that tells the agent how to do its job. So what you could do is if you're having issues here, you could say, this is the name of our tool, which is called knowledge base. You could tell the agent in its system prompt, hey, your job is to help users answer questions about the, our policy database. You have a tool called knowledge base. You need to use that in order to help them answer their questions. And that will help you refine the behavior of how this agent acts. All right, so the next one that we're doing is a customer support workflow. And as always, you have to figure out what is the trigger for my workflow. In this case, it's going to be triggered by a new email received. So I'm going to click on add first step. I'm going to type in Gmail, grab that node, and we have a trigger, which is on message received right here, and we're going to click on that. So what we have to do now is obviously authorize ourselves. So we're going to click on create new credential right here, and all we have to do here is use OAuth 2. So all we have to do is click on sign in. But before we can do that, we have to come over to our Google Cloud once again, and now we have to make sure we enable the Gmail API. So we'll click on Gmail API, and it'll be really simple. We'll just have to click on enable, and now we should be able to do that OAuth connection and actually sign in. You'll click on the account that you want to access the Gmail. You'll give it access to everything. Click continue, and then we're going to be connected as you can see. And then you'll want to name this credential as always. Okay, so now we're using our new credential. And what I'm going to do is if I hit fetch test event, so now we are seeing an email that I just got in this inbox, which in this case was N8N Cloud was granted access to your Google account, blah, blah, blah. So that's what we just got. Okay, so I just sent myself a different email and I'm going to fetch that email now from this inbox. And we can see that the snippet says, what is the privacy policy? I'm concerned about my data and passwords. And what we want to do is we want to turn off simplify, because what this button is doing is it's going to take the content of the email and basically, cut it off. So in this case, it didn't matter, but if you're getting long emails, it's going to cut off some of the email. So if we turn off simplify, fetch test event once again, we're now going to get a lot more information about this email, but we're still going to be able to access the actual content, which is right here. We have the text, what is privacy policy? I'm concerned about my data and passwords. Thank you. And then you can see we have other data too, like what the subject was, who the email is coming from, what their name is, all this kind of stuff. But the idea here is that we are going to be creating a workflow where if someone sends an email to this inbox right here, we're going to automatically look up the customer support policy and respond back to them so we don't have to. Okay, so the first thing I'm actually going to do is pin this data just so we can keep it here for testing, which basically means whenever we rerun this, it's not going to go look in our inbox. It's just going to keep this email that we pulled in, which helps us for testing, right? Okay, cool. So the next step here is we need to have AI basically filter to see, is this email customer support related? If yes, then we're going to have a response written. If no, we're going to do nothing. Because maybe the use case would be, okay, we're going to give N8N access to an inbox where we're only getting customer support emails, but sometimes maybe that's not the case. And let's just say we wanted to create this as sort of like an inbox manager where we could route off to different logic based on the type of email. So that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to click on the plus after the Gmail trigger, and I'm going to search for a text classifier node. And what this does is it's going to use AI to read the incoming email and then determine what type of email it is. So because we're using AI, the first thing we have to do is connect a chat model. We already have our OpenRouter credential set up. So I'm going to choose that. I'm going to choose the credential. And then for this one, let's just keep it with 40 mini. And now this AI node actually has AI. And I'm going to click into the text classifier. And the first thing we see is that there's a text to classify. So all we want to do here is we want to grab the actual content of the email. So I'm going to scroll down. I can see here's the text, which is the email content. We're going to drag that into this field. And now every time a new email comes through, the text classifier is going to be able to read it because we put in a variable, which basically represents the content of the email. So now that it has that, it still doesn't know what to classify it as or what its options are. So we're going to click on add category. The first category is going to be customer support. And then basically we need to give it a description of what a customer support email could look like. So I wanted to keep this one simple. It's pretty vague, but you could make this more detailed, of course. And I just said an email that's related to helping out a customer. They may be asking questions about our policies or questions about our products or services. And what we can do is we can give it specific examples of like, here are some past customer support emails and here's what they've looked like. And that will make this thing more accurate. But in this case, that's all we're gonna do. And then I'm gonna add one more category that's just going to be other. And then for now, I'm just gonna say any email that is not customer support related. Okay, cool. So now when we click out of here, we can see we have two different branches coming off of this node, which means when the text classifier decides, it's either gonna send it off this branch or it's gonna send it down this branch. So let's quickly hit play. It's going to be reading the email, using its brain, and now you can see it has output it in the customer support branch. We can also verify by clicking into here, and we can see customer support branch has one item and other branch has no items. And just to keep ourselves organized, right now I'm going to click on the other branch, and I'm just going to add an operation that says do nothing, just so we can see, what would happen if it went this way for now. But now is where we want to configure the logic of having an agent be able to read the email, hit the vector database to get relevant information, and then help us write an email. So I'm going to click on the plus after the customer support branch. I'm going to grab an AI agent. So this is going to be very similar to the way we set up our AI agent in the previous workflow. So it's kind of building on top of each other. And this time, if you remember in the previous one, we were talking to it with a connected chat trigger node. And as you can see here, we don't have a connected chat trigger node. So the first thing we want to do is change that. We want to define below. And this is where you would think, okay, what do we actually want the agent to read? We want it to read the email. So I'm going to do the exact same thing as before. I'm going to go into the Gmail trigger node, scroll all the way down until we can find the actual email content, which is right here, and just drag that right in. That's all we're going to do. And then we definitely want to add a system message for this agent. We are going to open up the system message, and I'm just going to click on expression so I can expand this up full screen, and we're going to write a system prompt. Again, for the sake of the video, keeping this prompt really concise, but if you want to learn more about prompting, then definitely check out my communities linked down below, as well as this video up here, and all the other tutorials on my channel. But anyways, what we said here is we gave it an overview and instructions. The overview says you are a customer support agent for Tech Haven. Your job is to respond to incoming emails with relevant information using your knowledge base tool. And so when we do hook up our Pinecone vector database, we're just going to make sure to call it knowledge base because that's what the agent thinks it has access to. And then for the instructions, I said your output should be friendly and use emojis, and always sign off as Mr. Helpful from Tech Haven Solutions. And then one more thing I forgot to do actually is we want to tell it what to actually output. So if we didn't tell it, it would probably output like a subject and a body. But what's going to happen is we're going to reply to the incoming email. We're not going to create a new one, so we don't need a subject. So I'm just going to say output only the body content of the email. So then we'll give it a try and see what that prompt looks like. We may have to come back and refine it, but for now we're good. And as you know, we have to connect a chat model, and then we have to connect our Pinecone. So first of all, chat model, we're going to use OpenRouter. And just to show you guys we can use a different type of model here, let's use something else. Okay, so we're going to go with Google Gemini 2.0 Flash. And then we need to add the Pinecone database. So I'm going to click on the plus under tool. I'm going to search for Pinecone vector store, grab that. And we have the operation is going to be retrieving documents as a tool for an AI agent. We're going to call this knowledge capital B base. And we're going to once again just say call this tool to access policy and FAQ information. We need to set up the index as well as the namespace. So sample, and then we're going to call the namespace, FAQ, because that's what it's called in our Pinecone right here, as you can see. And then we just need to add our embeddings model, and we should be good to go, which is embeddings OpenAI, text embedding 3 small. So we're going to hit the play above the AI agent, and it's going to be reading the email. As you can see, once again, the prompt user message, it's reading the email. What is the privacy policy? I'm concerned about my data and my passwords. Thank you. So we're going to hit the play above the agent. We're going to watch it use its brain. We're going to watch it call the vector store, and we got an error. Okay, so I'm getting this error, right? And it says provider returned error. And it's weird because basically why it's erroring is because of our chat model. and it's weird because it goes green, right? So anyways, what I would do here is if you're experiencing that error, it means there's something wrong with your key. So I would go reset it, but for now I'm just gonna show you the quick fix. I can connect to a OpenAI chat model real quick, and I can run this here, and we should be good to go. So now it's gonna actually write the email and output. Super weird error, but I'm honestly glad I caught that on camera to show you guys in case you face that issue, because it could be frustrating. So we should be able to look at the actual output, which is, hey there, thank you for your concern about privacy policy. At Tech Haven, we take your data protection seriously. So then it gives us a quick summary with data collection, data protection, cookies. If we clicked into here and went to the privacy policy, we could see that it is in fact correct. And then it also was friendly and used emojis like we told it to right here in the system prompt. And finally, it signed off as Mr. Helpful from Tech Haven Solutions, also like we told it to. So we're almost done here. The last thing we want to do is we want to have it actually reply to this person that triggered the whole workflow. So we're going to click on the plus, we're going to type in Gmail, grab a Gmail node, and we're going to do reply to a message. Once we open up this node, we already know that we have it connected because we did that earlier. We need to configure the message ID, the message type, and the message. And so all I'm going to do is, first of all, email type, I'm going to do text. For the message ID, I'm going to go all the way down to the Gmail trigger, and we have an ID right here. This is the ID we want to put into the message ID so that it responds in line on Gmail rather than creating a new thread. And then for the message, we're going to just drag in the output from the agent that we just had write the message. So I'm going to grab this output, put it right there, and now you can see this is how it's going to respond in email. And the last thing I want to do is I want to click on Add Option, append N8N attribution, and then just check that off. So then at the bottom of the email, it doesn't say this was sent by N8N. So finally, we'll hit this test step. We will see we get a success message that the email was sent. And I'll head over to the email to show you guys. Okay, so here it is. This is the one that we sent off to that inbox. And then this is the one that we just got back. As you can see, it's in the same thread. And it has basically the privacy policy outlined for us. Cool, so that's workflow number 2. A couple ways we could make this even better. One thing we could do is we could add a node right here. And this would be another Gmail one. And we could basically add a label to this email. So if I grab add label to message, we would do the exact same thing. We'd grab the message ID the same way we grabbed it earlier. So now it has the message ID of the label to actually create. And then we would just basically be able to select the label we want to give it. So in this case, we could give it the customer support label. We hit test step, we'll get another success message. And then in our inbox, if we refresh, we will see that that just got labeled as customer support. So you could add on more functionality like that. And you could also down here create more sections. So we could have finance, a logic built out for finance emails. We could have logic built out for all these other types of emails and plug them into different knowledge bases as well. Okay, so the third one we're gonna do is a LinkedIn content creator workflow. So what we're gonna do here is click on add first step, of course, and ideally, in production, what this workflow would look like is a schedule trigger. So what you could do is basically say every day, I want this thing to run at 7 a.m. That way I'm always gonna have a LinkedIn post ready for me at 7:30, I'll post it every single day. And if you wanted it to actually be automatic, you'd have to flick this workflow from inactive to active. And now it says your schedule trigger will now trigger executions on the schedule you have defined. So now it would be working, but for the sake of this video, we're going to turn that off, and we're just going to be using a manual trigger just so we can show how this works. But it's the same concept, right? It would just start the workflow. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to connect a Google Sheet. So I'm going to grab a Google Sheet node. I'm going to click on Get Rows in Sheet, and we have to create our credential once again. So we're going to create new credential. We're going to be able to do OAuth to sign in, but we're going to have to go back to Google Cloud, and we're going to have to grab a sheet and make sure that we have the Google Sheets API enabled. So we'll come in here, we'll click Enable, and now once this is good to go, we'll be able to sign in using OAuth 2. So very similar to what we just had to do for Gmail in that previous workflow, but now we can sign in. So once again, choosing my email, allowing it to have access, and then we're connected successfully, and then giving this a good name. And now what we can do is choose the document in the sheet that it's going to be pulling from. So I'm going to show you, I have one called LinkedIn Posts, and I only have one sheet. But let's show you the sheet real quick. So LinkedIn Posts, what we have is a topic, a status, and a content. And we're just basically going to be pulling in one row where the status equals to do. And then we are going to create the content, upload it back in right here, and then we're going to change the status to created. So then this same row doesn't get pulled in every day. So how this is going to work is that we're going to create a filter. So the first filter is going to be looking within the status column, and it has to equal to do. And if we click on test step, we should see that we're going to get like all of these items where there's a bunch of topics, but we don't want that. We only want to get the first row. So at the bottom here, add option, I'm gonna say return only first matching row, check that on. We'll test this again, and now we're only gonna be getting that top row to create content on. Cool, so we have our first step here, which is just getting the content from the Google Sheet. Now what we're gonna do is we need to do some web search on this topic in order to create that content. So I'm gonna add a new node. This one's gonna be called an HTTP request. So we're gonna be making a request to a specific API. And in this case, we're gonna be using Tavely's API. So go on over to Tavely.com and create a free account. You're gonna get 1,000 searches for free per month. Okay, here we are in my account. I'm on the free researcher plan, which gives me 1,000 free credits. And right here, I'm gonna add an API key. We're gonna name it, create a key, and we're going to copy this value. And so you'll start to get to the point when you connect to different services, you always need to have some sort of like token or API key. But anyways, we're gonna grab this in a sec. What we need to do now is go to the documentation that we see right here. We're gonna click on API reference. And now we have right here, this is gonna be the API that we need to use in order to search the web. So I'm not gonna really dive into like everything about HTTP requests right now. I'm just gonna show you the simple way that we can get this set up. So first thing that we're gonna do is we obviously see that we're using an endpoint called Tavely Search. And we can see it's a post request, which is different than like a GET request. And we have all these different things we need to configure, and it can be confusing. So all we wanna do is on the top right, we see this curl command. We're gonna click on the copy button. We're gonna go back into our init, hit import curl, paste in the curl command, hit import. And now the whole node magically just basically filled in itself. So that's really awesome. And now we can sort of break down what's going on. So for every HTTP request, you have to have some sort of method. Typically, when you're sending over data to a service, which in this case, we're gonna be sending over data to Tavely, it's gonna search the web and then bring data back to us. That's a post request because we're sending over body data. If we were just like kind of trying to hit an end, if we were just trying to access like, bestbuy.com and we just wanted to scrape the information, that could just be a simple GET request because we're not sending anything over. Anyways, then we're gonna have some sort of base URL and endpoint, which is right here. The base URL we're hitting is api.com/Tavely, and then the endpoint we're hitting is /search. So back in the documentation, you can see right here we have /search, but if we were doing like an extract, we would do /extract. So that's how you can kind of see the difference with the endpoints. And then we have a few more things to configure. The first one, of course, is our authorization. So in this case, we're doing it through a header parameter. As you can see right here, the curl command set it up. Basically, all we have to do is replace this token with our API key from Tavely. So I'm gonna go back here, copy that key. In init, I'm gonna get rid of token and just make sure that you have a space after the word bearer, and then you can paste in your token. And now we are connected to Tavely, but we need to configure our request before we send it off. So right here are the parameters within our body request, and I'm not gonna dive too deep into it. You can go to the documentation if you wanna understand, the main thing really is the query, which is what we're searching for, but we have other things like the topic. It can be general or news. We have search depth, we have max results, we have a time range, we have all this kind of stuff. Right now, I'm just gonna leave everything here as default. We're only gonna be getting one result, and we're gonna be doing a general topic, we're gonna be doing basic search. But right now, if we hit test step, we should see that this is gonna work, but it's gonna be searching for who is Leo Messi. And here is sort of like the answer we get back, as well as a URL. So this is an actual website we could go to about Lionel Messi, and then some content from that website, right? So we're going to change this to an expression so that we can put a variable in here rather than just a static hard-coded who is Leo Messi. We'll delete that query, and all we're gonna do is just pull in our topic. So I'm just gonna simply pull in the topic of AI image generation. Obviously it's a variable right here, but this is the result. And then we're gonna test step. And this should basically pull back an article about AI image generation. And, so here is a Deep AI link. We'll go to it and we can see this is an AI image generator. So maybe this isn't exactly what we're looking for. What we could do is basically just say we could hard code in, search the web for, and now it's going to be saying search the web for AI image generation. We could come in here and say, yeah, actually, let's get 3 results, not just 1. And then now we could test that step, and we're going to be getting a little bit different of a search result. AI image generation uses text descriptions to create unique visuals. And then now you can see we got 3 different URLs rather than just 1. Anyways, so that's our web search. And now that we have a web search based on our defined topic, we just need to write that content. So I'm going to click on the plus. I'm going to grab an AI agent. And once again, we're not giving it the connected chat trigger node to look at. That's nowhere to be found. We're going to feed in the research that was just done by Tavely. So I'm going to click on expression to open this up. I'm going to say article 1 with a colon, and I'm just going to drag in the content from article 1. I'm going to say article 2 with a colon and just drag in the content from article 2. And then I'm going to say article 3 colon and just drag in the content from the third article. So now it's looking at all 3 article contents. And now we just need to give it a system prompt on how to write a LinkedIn post. So open this up, click on add option, click on system message, and now let's give it a prompt about turning these 3 articles into a LinkedIn post. Okay, so I'm heading over to my custom GPT for a prompt architect. If you want to access this, you can get it for free by joining my free school community. You'll join that. It's linked in the description, and then you can just search for prompt architect and you should find the link. Anyways, real quick, it's just asking for some clarification questions. So anyways, I'm just shooting off a quick reply, and now it should basically be generating our system prompt for us. So I'll check in when this is done. Okay, so here's the system prompt. I'm going to just paste it in here, and I'm just gonna, disclaimer, this is not perfect at all. Like, I don't even want this tool section at all because we don't have a tool hooked up to this agent. We're obviously just gonna give it a chat model real quick. So in this case, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use Claude 3.5 Sonnet just because I really like the way that it writes content. So I'm using Claude through OpenRouter. And now let's give it a run and we'll just see what the output looks like. I'll just click into here while it's running and we should see that it's gonna read those articles and then we'll get some sort of LinkedIn post back. Okay, so here it is. The creative revolution is here and it's AI powered. Gone are the days of hiring expensive designers or struggling with complex software. Today's entrepreneurs can transform ideas into stunning visuals instantly using AI image generators. So as you can see, we have a few emojis, we have some relevant hashtags, and then at the end, it also said this post, it kind of explains why it made this post. We could easily get rid of that if all we want is the content. We would just have to throw that in the system prompt. But now that we have the post that we want, all we have to do is send it back into our Google Sheet and update that it was actually made. So we're gonna grab another Sheets node. We're gonna do update row and sheet. And this one's a little different. It's not just grabbing stuff from a row, we're trying to update stuff. So we have to say what document we want, what sheet we want, but now it's asking us what column do we wanna match on. So basically I'm gonna choose topic, and all we have to do is go all the way back down to the sheet. We're gonna choose the topic and drag it in right here, which is basically saying, okay, when this node gets called, whenever the topic equals AI image generation, which is a variable, obviously whatever topic triggered the workflow is what's gonna pop up here, we're gonna update that status. So back in the sheets, we can see that the status is currently to do, and we need to change it to created in order for it to go green. So I'm just gonna type in created, and obviously you have to spell this correctly the same way you have it in your Google Sheets. And then for the content, all I'm gonna do is we're just gonna drag in the output of the AI agent, and as you can see, it's gonna be spitting out the result. And now if I hit test step and we go back into the sheet, we'll basically watch this change. Now it's created, and now we have the content of our LinkedIn post as well, with some justification for why it created the post like this. And so like I said, you could basically have this be some sort of LinkedIn content making machine where every day it's gonna run at 7 a.m., it's gonna give you a post, and then what you could do also is you can automate this part of it, where you're basically having it create a few new rows every day if you give it a certain sort of like general topic to create topics on, and then every day you can just have more and more pumping out. So that is gonna do it for our third and final workflow. Okay, so that's gonna do it for this video. I hope that it was helpful. Obviously we connected to a ton of different credentials and a ton of different services. We even made a HTTP request to an API called Tavily. Now, if you found this helpful and you liked this sort of live step-by-step style, and you're also looking to accelerate your journey with N8N and AI automations, I would definitely recommend to check out my paid community. The link for that is down in the description. Okay, so hopefully those 3 workflows taught you a ton about connecting to different services and setting up credentials. Now I'm actually gonna throw in one more bonus step-by-step build, which is actually one that I shared in my paid community a while back, and I wanted to bring it to you guys now. So definitely finish out this course, and if you're still looking for some more and you like the way I teach, then feel free to check out the paid community. The link for that's down in the description. We've got a course in there that's even more comprehensive than what you're watching right now on YouTube. We've also got a great community of people that are using N8N to build AI automations every single day. So I'd love to see you guys in that community, but let's move ahead and build out this bonus workflow. Hey guys, so today I wanted to do a step-by-step of an invoice workflow. And this is because there's different ways to approach stuff like this, right? There's the conversation of OCR, there's a conversation of maybe extracting text from PDFs. There's the conversation of if you're always getting invoices in the exact same format, you probably don't need AI because you could use like a code node to extract the different parameters and then push that through. So that's kind of stuff we're gonna talk about today. And I haven't showed this one on YouTube. It's not like a YouTube build, but it's not an agent. It's an AI powered workflow. And I also wanted to talk about like just the foundational elements of connecting pieces, thinking about the workflow. So what we're going to do first actually is we're going to hop into Excalijar real quick. And I'm going to create a new one. And we're just going to real quickly wireframe out what we're doing. So first thing we're going to draw out here is the trigger. So we'll make this one yellow. We'll call this the trigger. And what this is going to be is invoice. Sorry, we're going to do new invoice. And this is going to be Google Drive. So the Google Drive node, it's going to be triggering the workflow, and it's going to be when a new invoice gets dropped into the folder that we're watching. So that's the trigger. From there, and like I said, this is going to be a pretty simple workflow. From there, what we're going to do is basically, it's going to be a PDF. So the first thing to understand is, actually, let me just put Google Drive over here. So the first thing to understand from here is, what do the invoices look like? These are the questions that we're going to have. So the first one's, what do the invoices look like? Because that determines what happens next. So if they are PDFs that happen every single time and they're always in the same format, then next we'd want to do, okay, well, we can just kind of extract the text from this, and then we can use a code node to extract the information we need per each parameter. Now, if it is a scanned invoice where it's maybe not as able to extract text from it or like turn it into a text doc, we'll probably have to do some OCR element. But if it's PDF that's generated by a computer, so we can extract the text, but they're not going to come through the same every time, which is what we have in this case. I have 2 example invoices. So we know we're looking for like business name, client name, invoice number, invoice date, due date, payment method, bank details, maybe stuff like that, right? But both of these are formatted very differently. They all have the same information, but they're formatted differently. So that's why we want to use an AI sort of information extractor node. So that's one of the main questions. The other ones we'd think about would be like, where do they go? So once we get them, where do they go? The frequency of them coming in, and then also like really any other action. So building off of where do they go, it's also like what actions will we take? So does that mean, are we just going to throw it in a CRM, or are we just going to throw it in a CRM or maybe a database, or are we also going to like send them an automated follow-up based on, the email that we extract from it and say, hey, we received your invoice, thanks. So like, what does that look like? So those are the questions we were initially going to ask. And then that helps us pretty much plan out the next steps. So because we figured out, basically, we figured out that we want to extract the same like X amount of information, the same X fields. So because we found out we want to extract the same X fields, but the format may not be consistent, we will use an AI information extractor. That is just a long sentence. So just shorten this up a little bit, or sorry, make it smaller a little bit. Okay, so we have that. The invoice will be like updated to our Google Sheet, which will just be like a database of invoice. So I'll just call it the invoice database. And then a follow-up email can be sent. Or no, not a follow-up email. We'll just say an email. An internal email will be sent. So an email will be sent to the internal billing team. Okay. So this is what we've got, right? We have our questions. We've kind of answered the questions. So now we know what the rest of the flow is going to look like. We already know this is not going to be an agent. It's going to be a workflow. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another node right here, which is going to be, PDF comes in. And what we want to do is we want to extract the text from that PDF. Let's make this text smaller. So we're going to extract the text, and we'll do this by using a extract text node. Okay, cool. Now, once we have the text extracted, what do we need to do? We need to So just moving over these initial questions. So we have the text extracted. What comes next? What comes next is we need to like decide on the fields to extract. And how do we get this? We get this from our invoice database. So let's quickly set up the invoice database. I'm going to do this by opening up a Google Sheet, which we are just going to call the invoice DB. So now we need to figure out what we actually want to put into our invoice DB. So first thing we'll do is, we're pretending that our business is called Greengrass, so we don't need that. We don't need the business information. We really just need the client information. So invoice number will be the first thing we want. So we're just setting up our database here. So invoice number. From there, we want to get client name, client address, client email, client phone. So client name, client email. Client name, client email, client address, and then we want client phone. Okay, so we have those 5 things, and let's see what else we want. Probably the amount. So we'll just do total amount due. Total amount. And due date. Invoice date and due date. Okay. Invoice date and due date. Okay, so we have these. What are these? 8 fields. And I'm just going to change these colors so it looks visually better for us. So here are the fields we have, and this is what we want to extract from every single invoice that we are going to receive. Cool. So we know we have these 8 things. I'm just going to, actually, no, we're fine. So we have our 8 fields to extract. And then they're going to be pushed into invoice DB. And then we'll set up once we have these fields, we can basically create our email. So this is going to be an AI node that's going to info extract. So it's going to extract the 8 fields that we have over here. So we're going to send the data into there, and it's going to extract those fields. Once we extract those fields, we don't probably need to set the data because coming out of this will basically be those 8 fields. So, every time what's going to happen is, actually, sorry, let me just add another node here so we can connect these. So what's going to come out of here is 1 item, which will be the 1 PDF. And then what's coming out of here will be 8 items every time. So that's what we've got. We could also want to think about maybe if 2 invoices get dropped in at the same time, how do we want to handle that loop or just push through? But we won't worry about that yet. So we've got 1 item coming in here. The node that's extracting the info will push out the 8 items and the 8 items only. And then what we can do from there is update invoice DB. And then from there we can also, and this could be like, out of here we do 2 things, or it could be like a sequential, if that makes sense. So what else we know we need to do is we know that we also need to email billing team. And so what I was saying there is we could either have it like this, where at the same time it branches off and it does those 2 things. And it really doesn't matter the order because they're both going to happen either way. So for now, to keep the flow simple, we'll just do this, where we're going to email the billing team. And what's going to happen is, essentially, because this is internal, we already know like the billing email. So, billing at example.com. This is what we're going to feed in because we already know the billing email. We don't have to extract this from anywhere. So we have all the info we need. We will. What else do we need to feed in here? So some of these fields we'll have to filter in. So some of the extracted fields, because like we want to say, hey, we got this invoice on this date to this client, and it's due on this date. So we'll have some of the extracted fields. We'll have a billing example, and then potentially like previous or like an email template. Potentially, like that's something we can think about. Or we can just prompt an agent to send off the email. So yeah, okay. So what we want to do here is actually this. What we need to do is the email has to be generated somewhere. So before we feed into an email billing team node, and let me actually change this. So we're going to have green nodes be AI, and then blue nodes are going to be not AI. So we're going to get another AI node right here, which is going to be craft email. So we'll connect these pieces once again. And so I hope you guys can see, like, this is me trying to figure out the workflow before we get into end-to-end, because then we can just plug in these pieces, right? And so I didn't even think about this. I mean, obviously we would have got in there to end-to-end and realized, okay, well, we need an email to actually configure these next fields, but that's just how it works, right? So anyways, this stuff is actually hooked up to the wrong place. We need this to be hooked up over here to the craft email tool. So email template will also be hooked up here. And then the billing example will be hooked up. This is the, no, this will still go here because that's actually the email team or the email node. So email node, send email node, which is an action, and we'll be feeding in this as well as the actual email. So the email that's written by AI will be fed in, and I think that ends the process, right? So we'll just add a quick, yellow node over here. And I always, my colors always change, but just trying to keep things consistent. Like in here, we're just saying, okay, the process is going to end now. Okay, so this is our workflow, right? New invoice, PDF comes through. We want to extract the text. We're using an extract text node, which is just going to be a static extract from PDF or convert PDF to text file type of thing. We'll get one item sent to an AI node to extract the 8 fields we need. The 8 items will be fed into the next node, which is going to update our Google Sheet. And I'll just also signify here, this is going to be a Google Sheet because it's important to understand the integrations and like who's involved in each process. So this is going to be AI. This is going to be AI. And that's going to be an extract node. This is going to be a Gmail node. And then we have the process end. Cool. So this is our wireframe. Now we can get into end-to-end and start building out. We can see that this is a very, very sequential flow. We don't need an agent. We just need 2 AI nodes here. So let us get into end-to-end and start building this thing. So we know what's starting this process, which is a trigger. So I'm going to grab a Google Drive trigger. We're going to do on changes to a specific file. Specific folder. Sorry, changes involving a specific folder. We're going to choose our folder, which is going to be the projects folder. And we're going to be watching for a file created. So we've got our ABC Tech Solutions. I'm going to download this as a PDF real quick. So download it as a PDF. I'm going to go to my projects folder in the drive, and I'm going to drag this guy in here. There it is. Okay, so there's our PDF. We'll come into here and we'll hit fetch test event. So we should be getting our PDF. Okay, nice. We will just make sure it's the right one. So we should see a ABC Tech Solutions invoice. Cool. So I'm going to pin this data just so we have it here. So just for reference, pinning data, all it does is just keeps it here. So if we were to refresh this page, we'll still have our pinned data, which is that PDF to play with. But if we would have not pinned it, then we would have had to fetch test event once again. So not a huge deal with something like this, but if you're maybe doing webhooks or API calls, you don't want to have to do it every time. So you can pin that data. Or like an output of an AI node if you don't want to have to rerun the AI. But anyway, so we have our PDF. We know next based on our wireframe, and let me just call this invoice flow wireframe. So we know next is we need to extract text. So perfect. We'll get right into end-to-end. We'll click on next and we will do an extract from file. So let's see, we want to extract from PDF. And although, what do we have here? We don't have any binary. So we were on the right track here, but we forgot that in order to, we get the PDF file ID, but we don't actually have it. So what we need to do here first is basically download the file because we need the binary to then feed that into the extract text node. So we need the binary. So sorry if that's really small, but basically in order to extract the text, we need to download the file first to get the binary, and then we can um, actually do that. So little thing we missed in the wireframe, but not a huge deal, right? So we're going to extend this one off. We're going to do a Google Drive node once again, and we're going to look at download file. So now we can say, okay, we're downloading a file. We can choose from a list, but this has to be dynamic because it's going to be based on that new trigger every time. So I'm going to do by ID. And now on the left-hand side, we can look for the file ID. So I'm going to switch to schema real quick so we can find the ID of the file. We're just going to have to go through. So we have a permissions ID right here. I don't think that's the right one. We have a spaces ID. I don't think that's the right one either. We're looking for an actual file ID. So let's see. Parents, icon link, thumbnail link. And sometimes you just have to find it and test things out, right? So I feel like I probably have just skipped right over it. Otherwise, we'll just try out some of these other IDs. Maybe it is this one. Yeah, I think it is this one because we see the name is right here and the ID is right here. So we'll try this. We're referencing that dynamically. We also see in here we could do a Google file conversion, which basically says, if it's docs, convert it to HTML. If it's drawings, convert it to that. If it's this, convert it to that. There's not a PDF one, so we'll leave this off, and we'll hit test step. So now we will see we got the invoice. We can click view, and this is exactly what we're looking at here with the invoice. So this is the correct one. Now, since we have it in our binary data over here, we have binary. Now we can extract it from the file. So, on the left is the inputs. On the right is going to be our output. So we're extracting from PDF. We're looking in the input binary field called data, which is right here. So I'll hit test step. And now we have text. So here's the actual text, right? The invoice, the information we need. And out of this is what we're going to pass over to extract. So let's go back to the wireframe. We have our text extracted. Now what we want to do is extract the specific 8 fields that we need. So hopping back into the workflow, we know that this is going to be an AI node, so it's going to be an information extractor. We have to first of all classify. We know that one item is going in here, and that's right here for us in the table, which is the actual text of the invoice. So we can open this up and we can see this is the text of the invoice. We want to do it from attribute description. So that's what it's looking for. So we can add our 8 attributes. We know there's going to be 8 of them, right? So we can create 8, but let's just first of all go into our database to see what we want. So the first one's invoice number. So I'm going to copy this over here, invoice number, and we just have to describe what that is. So I'm just going to say the number of the invoice. And this is required. We're going to make them all required. So the number of the invoice. Then we have the client name. Paste that in here. These should all be pretty self-explanatory. So the name of the client, we're going to make it required. Client email. So this is going to be a little bit repetitive, but the email of the client. And let me just quickly copy this for the next two. We've got client address. So there's client address, and we're going to say the address of the client required. And then what's the last one here? Client phone. Paste that in there, which is obviously going to be the phone number of the client. And here we can say, is this going to be a string or is it going to be a number? I'm going to leave it right now as a string, just because over here on the left, you can see the phone. We have parentheses in there, and maybe we want the format to come over with the parentheses and the little hyphen. So let's leave it as a string for now. We can always test and we'll come back. But client phone, we're going to leave that. We have total amount. Same reason here, I'm going to leave this one as a string because I want to keep the $sign when we send it over to Sheets, and we'll see how it comes over. But the total amount of the invoice required. What's coming next is invoice date and due date. So invoice date and due date. We can say these are going to be dates. So we're changing the data type here. They're both required. And the date the invoice was sent. And then we're going to say the date the invoice is due. So we're going to make sure this works. If we need to, we can get in here and make these descriptions more descriptive. But for now, we're good. We'll see if we have any options. You're an expert extraction algorithm. Only extract relevant information from the text. If you do not know the value of the attribute to extract, you may omit the attribute's value. So we'll just leave that as is. and we'll hit test step. It's going to be looking at this text. And of course, we're using AI, so we have to connect a chat model. So this will also alter the performance. Right now, we're going to go with the Google Gemini 2.0 Flash, see if that's powerful enough. I think it should be. And then we're going to hit play once again. So now it's going to be extracting information using AI. And what's great about this is that we already get everything out here in its own item. So it's really easy to map this now into our Google Sheet. So let's make sure this is all correct. Invoice number, that looks good. I'm going to open up the actual one. Yep. Client name, ABC Tech. Yep. Client email, finance at ABC Tech. Yep. Address and phone. We have address and phone. Perfect. We have total amount is 14,175. We have March 8th and March 22nd. If we go back up here, March 8th, March 22nd. Perfect. So that one extracted it well. And okay, so we have one item coming out, but technically there's 8 like properties in there. So anyways, let's go back to our wireframe. So after we extracted the 8 items, what do we do next? We're going to put them into our Google Sheet database. So what we know is we're going to grab a Google Sheets. We're going to do an append row because we're adding a row. We already have our credentials selected, so hopefully we can choose our invoice database. It's just going to be the first sheet, sheet 1. And now what happens is we have to map the columns. So you can see these are draggable. We can grab each one. If I go to schema, it's a little more apparent. So we have these 8 items, and it's going to be really easy now that we use an information extractor because we can just map, invoice number to invoice number, client name, email, and it's referencing these variables because every time after we do our information extractor, they're going to be coming out as JSON.output and then invoice number. And then for client name, JSON.output, client name. So we have these dynamic variables that will happen every single time. And obviously I'll show this when we do another example, but we can keep mapping everything in. And we also did it in that order. So it's really, really easy to do. We're just dragging and dropping and we are finished. Cool. So if I hit test step here, this is going to give us a message that says here are the fields basically. So there are the fields, they're mapped correctly. Come into the sheets. We now have automatically gotten this updated in our invoice database. And that's that. So let me just change some of these nodes. So this is going to be update database. This is information extractor, extract from file. I'm just going to say this is download binary. So now we know what's going on in each step. And we'll go back to the wireframe real quick. What happens after we update the database? Now we need to craft the email. And this is going to be using AI. And what's going to go into this is some of the extracted fields and maybe an email template. What we're going to do more realistically is just a system prompt. So back into initn, let's add a OpenAI message and model node. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose our model to talk to. In this case, we'll go 4.0 mini. It should be powerful enough. And now we're going to set up our system prompt and our user prompt. So at this point, if you don't understand the difference, the system prompt is the instructions. So we're telling this node how to behave. So first I'm going to change this node name to create email because that's obviously what's going on, keeping it organized. And now how do we explain to this node what its role is? So you are an email expert. You will receive, let me actually just open this up. You will receive invoice information. Your job is to notify the internal billing team that an invoice was received. Received/sent. Okay. So honestly, I'm going to leave it at that for now. It's really simple. If we wanted to, we can get in here and change the prompting as far as here is the format, here is the way you should be doing it. One thing I like to do is I like to say, this is your overview. And then if we need to get more granular, we can give it different sections like output or rules or anything like that. I'm also going to say you are an email expert for Greengrass Corp. Named Greenie. Okay, so we have Greenie from Greengrass Corp. That's our email expert that's going to email the billing team every time this workflow happens. So that's the overview. Now in the user prompt, think of this as when you're talking to ChatGPT. So obviously I had ChatGPT create these invoices. ChatGPT, when we say hello, that's a user message because this is an interaction, and it's going to change every time. But behind the scenes in this ChatGPT, OpenAI has a system prompt in here that's basically like you're a helpful assistant. You help users answer questions. So this window right here that we type in is our user message, and behind the scenes, telling the node how to act is our system prompt. Cool. So in here, I like to have dynamic information go into the user message, while I like to have static information in the actual system prompt. So except for maybe the exception usually of like giving it the current time and day, because that's an expression. So anyways, let's change this to an expression. Let's make this full screen. We are going to be giving it the invoice information that it needs to write the email, because that's what it's expecting. In the system prompt, we said you will receive invoice information. So first thing is going to be invoice number. We are going to grab invoice number and just drag it in. We're going to grab client name and just drag it in. So it's going to dynamically get these different things every time, right? So let's say maybe we don't need client email. Okay, maybe we do. We want client email. So we'll give it that. But the billing team right now doesn't need the address or phone. Let's just say that. But we do want them to know the total amount of that invoice. And we definitely want them to know the invoice date and the invoice due date. So we can now drag in these two things. So this was us just being able to customize what the AI node sees. Just keep in mind, if we don't drag anything in here, even if it's all on the input, the AI node doesn't see any of it. So let's hit test step and we'll see the type of email we get. We're going to have to make some changes, I already know, because we have to separate everything. But what it did is it created a subject, which is new invoice received, and then the invoice number. Dear billing team, I hope this message finds you well. We've received an invoice that requires your attention, and then it lists out some information, and then it also signs off Greeny Green Grass Corp. So first thing we want to do is, if we go back to our wireframe, what we have to send in, and we didn't document this well enough actually, but what goes into here is in order to send an email, we need a to, we need a subject, and we need the email body. So those are the three things we need. The to is coming from here, so we know that. And the subject and email are going to come from the craft email node. So we have the to, and then actually I'm going to move this up here. So now we can just see where we're getting all of our pieces from. So the to is coming from internal knowledge. This can be hard coded, but the subject and email are going to be dynamic from the AI node. Cool. So what we want to do now is we're going to say output, and we're going to tell it how to output information. So output the following parameters separately, and we're just going to say subject and email. So now it should be outputting two parameters separately, but it's not going to, because even though it says here's the subject and then it gives us a subject, and then it says here's the email and gives us an email, they're still in one field. Meaning if we hook up another node, which would be a Gmail send email, as we know, which is going to be where? Right here. Okay, so now this is the next node. Here's the fields we need. But as you can see, coming out of the create email AI node, we have this whole parameter called content, which has the subject and the email. And we need to get these split up so that we can drag one into the subject and one into the to, right? So first of all, I'm just making these expressions just so we can drag stuff in later. And so that's what we need to do. And our fix there is we come into here and we just check this switch that says output content is JSON, which will rerun, and now we'll get subject and body, subject and email, in two different fields right here we can see, which is awesome, because then we can open up our send email node, we can grab our subject, it's going to be dynamic, and we can grab our email, it's going to be dynamic. Perfect. We're going to change this to text, and we're going to add an option down here, and we're just going to say append N8N attribution and turn that off, because we just don't want to see the message at the bottom that says this was sent by N8N. And if we go back to our wireframe, wherever that is over here, we know that this is the email that's going to be coming through. or we're going to be sending to every time because we're sending internally. So we can put that right in here, not as a variable. Every time this is going to be sending to billing@example.com. So this really could be fixed. It doesn't have to be an expression. Cool. So we will now hit test step. And we can see that we got this email sent. So let me open up a new tab. Let me go into our Gmail. I will go to the sent items, and we will see we just got this billing email. So obviously it was a fake email, but this is what it looks like. We've received a new invoice from ABC Tech. Please find the details below. We got invoice number, client name, client email, total amount, total invoice date, due date. Please process this invoice accordingly. So that's perfect. We could also, if we wanted to, we could prompt it a little bit differently to say, like, this has been updated within the database, and you can check it out here. So let's do that real quick. What we're going to do is we're going to say, because we've already updated the database, I'm going to come into our Google Sheet and I'm going to copy this link, and we're basically going to bake this into the email. So I'm going to say, we're going to give it a section called email. Inform the billing team of the invoice. Let them know we have also updated this in the invoice database, and they can view it here. And we'll just give them this link to that Google Doc. So every time they'll just be able to send that over. So I'm going to hit test step. We should see a new email over here, which is going to include that link, I hope. So there's the link. We'll run this email tool again to send a new email. Hop back into Google Gmail. We got a new one. And now we can see we have this link. So you can view it here. We've already updated this in the invoice database. We click on the link, and now we have our database as well. So cool. Now let's say at this point we're happy with our prompting. We're happy with the email. This is done. If we go back to the wireframe, the email is the last node. So maybe just to make it look consistent, we will just add over something here that just says nothing. And now we know that the process is done because nothing to do. So this is basically this is what we wireframed out. So we know that we're happy with this process. We understand what's going on. But now let's unpin this data real quick, and let's drop in another invoice to make sure that even though it's formatted differently, so this XYZ formatted differently, but the AI should still be able to extract all the information that we need. So I'm going to come in here and download this one as a PDF. We have it right there. I'm going to drop it into our Google Drive. So we have XYZ Enterprises now. Come back into the workflow, and we'll hit fetch test event. Let's just make sure this is the right one. So XYZ Enterprises, nice. And now I'm just going to hit test workflow, and we'll watch it download, extract, get the information, update the database, create the email, send the email, and then nothing else should happen after that. So boom, we're done. Let's click into our email. Here we have our new invoice received. So it updated differently, like the subject's dynamic because it was from XYZ, a different invoice number. As you remember, the ABC one, it started with THAI, and this one starts with INV. So that's why the subject is different. Dear billing team, we have received a new invoice from XYZ Enterprises. Please find the details below. There's the number, the name, all this kind of information. The total amount was 13,856. Let's go make sure that's right. Total amount 13,856. March 8th, March 22nd. Once again, is that correct? March 8th, March 22nd. Nice. And finance XYZ. Perfect. Okay. The invoice has been updated in the database. You can view it here. So let's click on that link. Nice. We got our information populated into the spreadsheet. As you can see, it all looks correct to me as well. Our strings are coming through nice, and our dates are coming through nice. So I'm going to leave it as is. Now keep in mind, because these are technically coming through as strings, that's fine for phone. But Google Sheets automatically made these numbers, I believe. So if we wanted to, we could sum these up because they're numbers. Perfect. Okay. Cool. So that's how that works, right? That's the email. We wireframed it out. We tested it with 2 different types of invoices. They weren't consistent formatting, which means we couldn't probably have used a code node. But the AI is able to read this and extract it. As you can see right here, we got the same 8 items extracted that we were looking for. So that's perfect. Cool. So I'm going to call this one here. I will attach the actual flow and I will attach just a picture of this wireframe, I suppose, in this post. And by now, you guys have already seen that, I'm sure. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. The whole process of like the way that I approach, and I know this was a 35-minute build, so it's not like the same as like building something more complex. But as far as like a general workflow, this is a pretty solid one to get started with. It shows elements of using AI within a simple workflow that's going to be sequential, and it shows like the way we have to reference our variables and how we have to drag things in, and obviously the component of like wireframing out in the beginning to understand the full flow, at least 80%, 85% of the full flow before you get in there. So cool. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I will see you guys in the community. Thanks. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed those step-by-step builds. Hopefully right now you're feeling like you're in a really good spot with n8n and everything's starting to piece together. This next video we're going to move into is about APIs, because in order to really get more advanced with our workflows and our AI agents, we have to understand the most important thing, which is APIs. They let our n8n workflows connect to anything that you actually want to use, so it's really important to understand how to set up, and when you understand it, the possibilities are endless, and it's really not even that difficult, so let's break it down. If you're building AI agents but you don't really understand what an API is or how to use them, don't worry, you're not alone. I was in that exact same spot not too long ago. I'm not a programmer, I don't know how to code, but I've been teaching tens of thousands of people how to build real AI systems, and what changed the game for me was when I understood how to use APIs. So in this video, I'm going to break it down as simple as possible, no technical jargon, and by the end, you'll be confidently setting up API calls within your own agentic workflows. Let's make this easy. So the purpose of this video is to understand how to set up your own requests so you can access any API, because that's where the power truly comes in. And before we get into n8n and we set up a couple live examples and I show you guys my thought process when I'm setting up these API calls, first I thought it would just be important to understand what an API really is. And APIs are so powerful because let's say we're building agents within n8n. Basically, we can only do things within n8n's environment unless we use an API to access some sort of server. So whether that's like a Gmail or a HubSpot or Airtable, whatever we want to access that's outside of n8n's own environment, we have to use an API call to do so. And so that's why at the end of this video, when you completely understand how to set up any API call you need, it's going to be a complete game changer for your workflows, and it's also going to unlock pretty much unlimited possibilities. All right, now that we understand why APIs are important, let's talk about what they actually do. So API stands for Application Programming Interface, and at the highest level, in the most simple terms, it's just a way for two systems to talk to each other. So n8n and whatever other system we want to use in our automations. So keeping it relevant to us, it's our n8n AI agent and whatever we want it to interact with. Okay, so I said we're going to make this as simple as possible, so let's do it. What we have here is just a scenario where we go to a restaurant. So this is us right here, and what we do is we sit down and we look at the menu and we look at what food that the restaurant has to offer. And then when we're ready to order, we don't talk directly to the kitchen or the chefs in the kitchen, we talk to the waiter. So we'd basically look at the menu, we'd understand what we want, then we would talk to the waiter and say, hey, I want the chicken parm. The waiter would then take our order and deliver it to the kitchen. And after the kitchen sees the request that we made, and they understand, okay, this person wants chicken parm, I'm gonna grab the chicken parm, not the salmon, and then we're basically gonna feed this back down the line through the waiter, all the way back to the person who ordered it in the first place. And so that's how you can see we use an HTTP request to talk to the API endpoint and receive the data that we want. And so now a little bit more of a technical example of how this works in n8n. Okay, so here is our AI agent, and when it wants to interact with a service, it first has to look at that service's API documentation to see what is offered. Once we understand that, we'll read that and we'll be ready to make our request, and we will make that request using an HTTP request. From there, that HTTP request will take our information and send it to the API endpoint. The endpoint will look at what we ordered and it will say, okay, this person wants this data, so I'm gonna go grab that, I'm gonna send it back to the HTTP request, and then the HTTP request is actually what delivers us back the data that we asked, and we know that it was available because we had to look at the API documentation first. So I hope that helps. I think that looking at it visually makes a lot more sense, especially when you hear, HTTP, API, endpoint, all this kind of stuff. But really, it's just going to be this simple. So now let me show an example of what actually this looks like in n8n and when you would use one and when you wouldn't need to use one. So here we have two examples where we're accessing a service called Open Weather Map, which basically just lets us grab the weather data from anywhere in the world. And so on the left, what we're doing is we're using OpenWeather's native integration within n8n. And so what I mean by native integration is just that when we go into n8n and we click on the plus button to add an app, and we want to see the different integrations, it has Airtable, it has Affinity, it has Airtop, it has all these AWS things. It has a ton of native integrations. And all that a native integration is is an HTTP request, but it's just like wrapped up nicely in a UI for us to basically fill in different parameters. And so once you realize that, it really clears everything up, because the only time you actually need to use an HTTP request is if the service you want to use is not listed in this list of all the native integrations. Anyways, let me show you what I mean by that. So like I said, on the left, we have OpenWeatherMap's native integration. So basically what we're doing here is we're sending over, okay, I'm using OpenWeatherMap. I'm going to put in the latitude and the longitude of the city that I'm looking for. And as you can see over here, what we get back is Chicago, as well as a bunch of information about the current weather in Chicago. And so if you were to fill this out, it's super, super intuitive, right? All you do is put in the lat and long, you choose your format as far as imperial or metric, and then you get back data. And that's the exact same thing we're doing over here, where we use an HTTP request to talk to OpenWeather's API endpoint. And so this just looks a little more scary and intimidating because we have to set this up ourselves. But if we zoom in, we can see it's pretty simple. We're making a GET request to OpenWeatherMap's URL endpoint. And then we're putting over the lat and the long, which is basically the exact same from the one on the left. And then as you can see, we get the same information back about Chicago and then some weather information about Chicago. And so the purpose of that was just to show you guys that these native integrations, all we're doing is we're accessing some sort of API endpoint. It just looks simpler and easier, and there's a nice user interface for us rather than setting everything up manually. Okay, so hopefully that's starting to make a little more sense. Let's move down here to the way that I think about setting up these HTTP requests, which is we're basically just setting up filters and making selections. All we're doing is we're saying, okay, I want to access server X. When I access server X, I need to tell it basically, what do I want from you? So it's the same way when you're going to order some pizza, you have to first think about which pizza shop do I want to call. And then once you call them, it's like, okay, I need to actually order something. It has to be small, medium, large. It has to be pepperoni or cheese. You have to tell it what you want, and then they will send you the data back that you asked for. So when we're setting these up, we basically have like 5 main things to look out for. The first one you have to do every time, which is a method. And the 2 most common are going to be a GET or a POST. Typically a GET is when you're just going to access an endpoint and you don't have to send over any information. You're just going to get something back. But a POST is when you're going to send over certain parameters and certain data and say, okay, using this information, send me back what I'm asking for. The great news is, and I'll show you later when we get into end-to-end to actually do a live example, it'll always tell you to say, is this a GET or a POST? Then the next thing is the endpoint. You have to tell it like which website or which endpoint you want to actually access, which URL. From there, we have 3 different parameters to set up, and also just realize that this one should say body parameters. But this used to be the most confusing part to me, but it's really not too bad at all. So let's break it down. So keep in mind, when we're looking at that menu, that API documentation, it's always going to basically tell us, okay, here are your query parameters, here are your header parameters, and here are your body parameters. So as long as you understand how to read the documentation, you'll be just fine. But typically the difference here is that when you're setting up query parameters, this is basically just saying a few filters. So if you search pizza into Google, it'll come google.com/search, which would be Google's endpoint. And then we would have a question mark and then Q equals, and then a bunch of different filters. So as you can see right here, the first filter is just Q equals pizza. And the Q is, it stands for query parameters. And you don't even have to understand that. That's just me showing you kind of like a real example of how that works. From there, we have to set up a header parameter, which is pretty much always going to exist. And I basically just think of header parameters as, authorizing myself. So usually when you're doing some sort of API where you have to pay, you have to get a unique API key and then you'll send that key. And if you don't put your key in, then you're not going to be able to get the data back. So like if you're ordering a pizza and you don't give them your credit card information, they're not going to send you a pizza. And usually an API key is something you want to keep secret, because let's say, you put $10 into some sort of API that's going to create images for you. If that key gets leaked, then anyone could use that key and could go create images for themselves for free, but they'd be running down your credits. And these can come in different forms, but I just wanted to show you a really common one is, you'll have your key value pairs where you'll put authorization as the name, and then in the value, you'll put bearer space your API key. Or in the name, you could just put API_key, and then in the value, you'd put your API key. But once again, the API documentation will tell you how to configure all this. And then finally, the body parameters, if you need to send something over to get something back. Let's say we're making an API call to our CRM, and we want to get back information about John. We could send over something like name equals John. The server would then grab all records that have name equal John, and then it would send them back to you. So those are basically like the 5 main things to look out for when you're reading through API documentation and setting up your HTTP request. But the beautiful thing about living in 2025 is that we now have the most beautiful thing in the world, which is a curl command. And so what a curl command is it lets you hit copy And then you basically can just import that curl into N8N and it will pretty much set up the request for you. Then at that point, it really is just like putting in your own API key and tweaking a few things if you want to. So let's take a look at this curl statement for a service called Tavily. As you can see, that's the endpoint is api.tavily.com. All this basically does is it lets you search the internet. So you can see here, this curl statement tells us pretty much everything we need to know to use this. So it's telling us that it's going to be a post. It's showing us the API endpoint that we're going to be accessing. It shows us how to set up our header. So that's going to be authorization, and then it's going to be bearer space API token. It's basically just telling us that we're going to get this back in JSON format. And then you can see all of these different key value pairs right here in the data section. And these are basically going to be body parameters where we can say, query is who is Leo Messi. So that's what we'd be searching the internet for. We have topic equals general. We have search depth equals basic. So hopefully you can see all of these are just different filters where we can choose, okay, do we want one max result or do we want 4? Or do we have a time range or do we not? So this is really just at the end of the day, it's basically like ordering DoorDash. Because what we would have up here is, like what actual restaurant do we want to order food from? We would put in our credit card information. We would say, do we want this to be delivered to us? Do we want to pick it up? We would basically say, do you want a cheeseburger, no pickles, no onions? Like what are the different things that you want to flip? Do you want a side? Do you want fries or do you want salad? Like what do you want? And so once you get into this mindset where all I have to do is understand this documentation and just tweak these little things to get back what I want, it makes setting up API calls so much easier. And if another thing that kind of intimidates you is the aspect of JSON, it shouldn't, because all it is a key value pair. Like we kind of talked about, this is JSON right here. And you're going to send your body parameter over as JSON, and you're also going to get back JSON. So the more and more you use it, you're going to recognize like how easy it is to set up. So anyways, I hope that made sense and broke it down pretty simply. Now that we've seen like how it all works, it's going to be really valuable to get into N8N. I'm going to open up a API documentation, and we're just going to set up a few requests together and we'll see how it works. Okay, so here's the example. I did OpenWeather's native integration and then also OpenWeather as an HTTP request. And you can see it was like basically the exact same thing. So let's say that what we want to do is we want to use Perplexity, which if you guys don't know what Perplexity is, it is basically, kind of similar to ChatGPT, but it has really good like internet search and research. So let's say we wanted to use this and hook it up to an AI agent so it can do web search for us. But as you can see, if I type in Perplexity, there's no native integration for Perplexity. So that basically signals to us, okay, we can only access Perplexity using an HTTP request. And real quick side note, if you're ever thinking to yourself, I wonder if I can have my agent interact with blank. The answer is yes, if there's API documentation. And all you have to do typically to find out if there's API documentation is just come in here and be like, Gmail API documentation. And then we can see Gmail API is a RESTful API, which means it has an API and we can use it within our automations. Anyways, getting back to this example of setting up a Perplexity HTTP request, we have our HTTP request right here and it's left completely blank. So as you can see, we have our method, we have our endpoint, we have query, header, and body parameters, but nothing has been set up yet. So what we need to do is we would head over to Perplexity, as you can see right here. And at the bottom, there's this little thing called API. So I'm gonna click on that. And this opens up this little page. And so what I have here is Perplexity's API. If I click on Developer Docs, and then right here I have API reference, which is integrate the API into your workflows, which is exactly what we want to do. This page is where people might get confused and it looks a little bit intimidating, but hopefully this breakdown will show you how you can understand any API doc, especially if there's a curl command. So all I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to right away hit copy and make sure you're in curl. If you're in Python, it's not the same. So click on curl. I copied this curl command and I'm going to come back into N8N, hit import curl, and all I have to do is paste, click import, and basically what you're going to see is this HTTP request is going to get basically populated for us. So now we have the method has been changed to post. We have the correct URL, which is the API endpoint, which basically is telling this node, okay, we're going to use Perplexity's API. You can see that the curl had no query parameters, so that's left off. It did turn on headers, which is basically just having us put our API key in there. And then, of course, we have the JSON body that we need to send over. Okay, so at this point, what I would do is now that we have this set up, we know we just need to put in a few things of our own. So the first thing to tackle is how do we actually authorize ourselves into Perplexity? All right, so I'm back in Perplexity. I'm gonna go to my account and click on settings. And then all I'm gonna do is basically, I need to find where I can get my API key. So on the left-hand side, if I go all the way down, I can see API keys. So I'll click on that. And all this is gonna do is this shows my API key right here. So I'll have to click on this, hit copy, come back into N8N. And then all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just delete where this says token, but I'm gonna make sure to leave a space after bearer and hit paste. So now this basically authorizes ourselves to use Perplexity's endpoint. And now if we look down at the body request, we can see we have this thing set up for us already. So if I hit test step, this is real quick, gonna make a request over. It just hit Perplexity's endpoint, and as you can see, it came back with data. And what this did is it basically searched Perplexity for how many stars are there in our galaxy. And that's where right here we can see the Milky Way galaxy, which is our galaxy, is estimated to contain between 100 billion and 400 billion stars, blah, blah, blah. So we know basically, okay, if we want to change how this endpoint works, what data we're going to get back, this right here is where we would change our request. And if we go back into the documentation, we can see what else we have to set up. So the first thing to notice is that there's a few things that are required and then some things that are not. So right here we have, authorization, that's always required. The model is always required, like which Perplexity model are we going to use? The messages are always required. So this is basically a mix of a system message and a user message. So here the example is be precise and concise. And then the user message is how many stars are there in the galaxy. So if I came back here and I said, be funny in your answer. So I'm basically telling this model how to act. And then instead of how many stars are there in the galaxy, I'm just going to say, how long do cows live? And I'll make another request off to Perplexity. So you can see what comes back is this longer content. So it's not being precise and concise. And it says, so you're wondering how long cows live? Well, let's move into the details. So as you can see, it's being funny. Okay, back into the API documentation, we have a few other things that we could configure, but notice how these aren't required the same way that these ones are. So we have max tokens. We could basically put in an integer and say, how many tokens do you want to use at the maximum? We could change the temperature, which is, like how random the response would be. And this one says, it has to be between 0 and 2. And as we keep scrolling down, you can see that there's a ton of other little levers that we can just tweak a little bit to change the type of response that we get back from Perplexity. And so once you start to read more and more API documentation, you can understand how you're really in control of what you get back from the server. And also you can see sometimes you have to send over Booleans, which is basically just true or false. Sometimes you can only send over numbers. Sometimes you can only send over strings. And sometimes it'll tell you, what will this value default to? And also what are the only accepted values that you actually could fill out? So for example, if we go back to this temperature setting, we can see it has to be a number. And if you don't fill that out, it's going to be 0.2. But we can also see that if you do fill this out, it has to be between 0 or 2. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Okay, cool. So that's basically how it works. We just set up an HTTP request and we change the system prompt and we change the user prompt. And that's how we can customize this thing to work for us. And that's really cool as a node because we can set up, a workflow to pass over some sort of variable into this request. So it searches the web for something different every time. But now let's say we want to give our agent access to this tool and the agent will decide what am I going to search the web for based on what the human asks me. So it's pretty much the exact same process. We'll click on add a tool and we're going to add an HTTP request tool only because Perplexity doesn't have a native integration. And then once again, you can see we have an import curl button. So if I click on this and I just import that same curl that we did last time, once again, it fills out this whole thing for us. So we have post, we have the Perplexity endpoint, we have our authorization bearer, but notice we have to put in our token once again. And so a cool little hack is, let's say you're going to use Perplexity a lot. Rather than having to go grab your API key every single time, what we can do is we can just send it over right here in the authentication tab. So let me show you what I mean by that. If I click into authentication, I can click on generic credential type. And then from here, I can basically choose, okay, is this a basic auth, a bearer auth, all this kind of stuff. A lot of times it's just going to be header auth. So that's why we know right here, we can click on header auth. And as you can see, we know that because we're sending this over as a header parameter. And we just did this earlier and it worked. So as you can see, I have header auths already set up. I probably already have a Perplexity one set up right here. But I'm just going to go ahead and create a new one with you guys to show you how this works. So I just create a new header auth. And all we have to do is the exact same thing that we had down in the request that we just sent over, which means in the name, we're just going to type in authorization with a capital A. And once again, we can see in the API docs, this is how you do it. So authorization. And then we can see that the value has to be capital B bearer space API token. So I'm just going to come into here, bearer space API token. And then all I have to do is, first of all, name this so we can save it. And then if I hit save, now every single time we want to use Perplexity's endpoint, we already have our credentials saved. So that's great. And then we can turn off the headers down here because we don't need to send it over twice. So now all we have to do is change this body request a little bit just to make it more dynamic. So in order to make it dynamic, the first thing we have to do is change this to an expression. Now we can see that we can basically add a variable in here. And what we can do is we can add a variable that basically just tells the AI model, the AI agent, here is where you're going to send over your internet search query. And so we already know that all that is the user content right here. So if I delete this, and basically if I do 2 curly braces, and then within the curly braces, I do a $sign and I type in from, I can grab a from AI function. And this from AI function just indicates to the AI agent, I need to choose something to send over here. And you guys will see an example and it will make more sense. I also did a full video breaking this down. So if you want to see that, I'll tag it right up here. Anyways, as you can see, all we have to really do is enter in a key. So I'm just going to do, 2 quotes. And within the quote, I'm going to put in search term. And so now the agent will be reading this and say, okay, whenever the user interacts with me and I know I need to search the internet, I'm just going to fill this whole thing in with the search term. So now that that's set up, I'm just going to change this request to, I'm just going to call it web search to make that super intuitive for the AI agent. And now what we're going to do is we are going to talk to the agent and see if it can actually search the web. Okay, so I'm asking the AI agent to search the web for the best movies. It's going to think about it. It's going to use this tool right here, and then we'll basically get to go in there and we can see what it filled in that search term placeholder that we gave it. So first of all, the answer it gave us was IMDb top 250, Rotten Tomatoes, all this kind of stuff, right? So that's movie information that we just got from Perplexity. And what I can do is click into the tool, and we can see in the top left, it filled out search term with best movies. And we can even see that in action if we come down to the body request that it sent over and we expand this. We can see on the right-hand side in the result panel, this is the JSON body that it sent over to Perplexity, and it filled it in with best movies. And then, of course, what we got back was our content from Perplexity, which is, here are some of the best movies across major platforms. All right, then real quick before we wrap up here, I just wanted to talk about some common responses that you can get from your HTTP requests. So the rule of thumb to follow is if you get data back and you get a 200, you're good. Sometimes you'll get a response back, but you won't explicitly see a 200 message. But if you're getting the data back, then you're good to go. And a quick example of this is down here we have that HTTP request, which we went over earlier in this video, where we went to Open Weather Maps API. And you can see down here we got code 200 and there's data coming back, and 200 is good. That's a success code. Now, if you get a request in the 400s, that means that you probably set up the request wrong. So 400 bad request, that could mean that your JSON's invalid. It could just mean that you have like an extra quotation mark or you have, an extra comma, something as silly as that. So let me show a quick example of that. We're going to test this workflow, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to send over a query to Tavily, and you can see what we get is an error that says JSON parameter needs to be valid JSON, and this would be a 400 error. And the issue here is if we go into the JSON body that we're trying to send over, you can see in the result panel, we're trying to send over a query that has basically 2 sets of quotation marks, if you can see that. But here's the great news about JSON. It is so universally used and it's been around for so long that we could basically just copy the result over to ChatGPT, paste it in here and say, I'm getting an error message that says JSON parameter needs to be valid JSON. What's wrong with my JSON? And as you can see, it says the issue with your JSON is the use of double quotes around the string value in this line. So now we'd be able to go fix that. And if we go back into the workflow, we take away these double quotes right here, test the step again. Now you can see it's spinning and it's going to work. And we should get back some information about pineapples on pizza. Another common error you could run into is a 401, meaning unauthorized. This typically just means that your API key is wrong. You could also get a 403, which is forbidden. That just means that maybe your account doesn't have access to this data that you're requesting or something like that. And then another one you could get is a 404, which sometimes you'll get that if you type in a URL that doesn't exist. It just means this doesn't exist. We can't find it. And a lot of times when you're looking at the actual API documentation that you want to set up a request to, so here's an example with Tavily, it'll show you what typical responses could look like. So here's one where, we're using Tavily to search for who is Leo Messi. This was an example we looked at earlier. And with a 200 response, we are getting back like a query, an answer, results, stuff like that. We could also see we could get a 400, which would be for bad request, invalid topic. We could have a 401, which means invalid API key. We could get all these other ones like 429, 432, but in general, 400 is bad. And then even worse is a 500. And this just basically means something's wrong with the server. Maybe it doesn't exist anymore, or there's a bug on the server side. But the good news about a 500 is it's not your fault. You didn't set up the request wrong. It just means something is wrong with the server. And it's really important to know that, because if you think you did something wrong, but it's really not your fault at all, you may be banging your head against the wall for hours. So anyways, what I wanted to highlight here is there's never just like a one size fits all. I know how to set up this one API call, so I can just set up every single other API call the exact same way. The key is to really understand, how do you read the API documentation? How do you set up your body parameters and your different header parameters? And then if you start to run into issues, the key is understanding and actually reading the error message that you're getting back and adjusting from there. All right, so that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully this has left you feeling a lot more comfortable with diving into API documentation, walking through it just step by step, using those curl commands, and really just understanding all I'm doing is I'm setting up filters and levers here. I don't have to get super confused. It's really not that technical. I'm pretty much in complete control over what my API is going to send me back. The same way I'm in complete control when I'm, ordering something on DoorDash or ordering something on Amazon, whatever it is. Hopefully by now the concept of APIs and HTTP requests makes a lot more sense. But really just to drive it home, what we're going to do is hop into some actual setups in n8n of connecting to some different popular APIs and walk through a few more step-by-steps just to really make sure that we understand the differences that can come with different API documentation and how you read it and how you set up stuff like your credentials and the body requests. So let's move into this next part, which I think is going to be super valuable to see different API calls in action. Okay, so in n8n, when we're working with a large language model, whether that's an AI agent or just like an AI node, what happens is we can only access the information that is in the large language model's training data. And a lot of times that's not going to be super up to date and real time. So what we want to do is access different APIs that let us search the web or do real-time search. And what we saw earlier in that third step-by-step workflow was we used a tool called Tavily and we accessed it through an HTTP request node, which, as you guys know, looks like this. And we were able to use this to communicate with Tavily's API server. So if we ever want to access real-time information or do research on certain search terms, we have to use some sort of API to do that. So like I said, we talked about Tavily, but in this video, I'm going to help you guys set up Perplexity, which if you don't know what it is, it's kind of like ChatGPT, but it's really, really good for web search and in-depth research. And it has that same sort of like, chat interface as ChatGPT, but what you also have is access to the API. So if I click on API, we can see this little screen, but what we want to go to is the developer docs. And in the developer docs, what we're looking for is the API reference. We can also click on the quick start guide right here, which just shows you how you can set up your API key and get all that kind of stuff. So that's exactly what we're going to do is set up an API call to Perplexity. So I'm going to click on API reference, and what we see here is the endpoint to access Perplexity's API. And so what I'm going to do is just grab this curl command from that right-hand side, go back into our n8n, and I'm just going to import the curl right into here. And then all we have to do from there is basically configure what we want to research and put in our own API key. So there we go. We have our node pretty much configured. And now the first thing we see we need to set up is our authorization API key. And what we could do is set this up in here as a generic credential type and save it. But right now we're just going to keep things as simple as possible where we imported the curl. And now I'm just going to show you where to plug in little things. So we have to go back over to Perplexity and we need to go get an API key. So I'm going to come over here to the left and I'm going to click on my settings, and hopefully in here we're able to find where our API key lives. Now we can see in the bottom left over here we have API keys, and what I'm going to do is come in here and just create a new secret key, and we just got a new one generated. So I'm just going to click on this button, click on copy, and all we have to do is replace the word right here that says token. So I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to make sure to leave a space after the word bearer, and I'm going to paste in my Perplexity API key. So now we should be connected, and now what we need to do is we need to set up the actual body request. So if I go back into the documentation, we can see this is basically what we're sending over. So that first thing is a model, which is the name of the model that will complete your prompt. And if we wanted to look at different models, we could click into here and look at other supported models from Perplexity. So it took us to the screen, we click on models, and we can see we have Sonar Pro or Sonar. We have Sonar Deep Research. We have some reasoning models as well. But just to keep things simple, I'm going to stick with the default model right now, which is just Sonar. Then we have an object that we're sending over, which is messages. And within the messages object, we have a few things. So first of all, we're sending over content, which is the contents of the message in turn of conversation. It can be in a string or an array of parts. And then we have a role, which is going to be the role of the speaker in the conversation. And we have available options: system, user, or assistant. So what you can see in our request is that we're sending over a system message as well as a user message. And the system message is basically the instructions for how this AI model on Perplexity should act. And then the user message is our dynamic search query that is going to change every time. And if we go back into the documentation, we can see that there are a few other things we could add, but we don't have to. We could tell Perplexity what is the max tokens we want to use, what is the temperature we want to use. We could have it only search for things in the past week or day. So this documentation is basically going to be all the filters and settings that you have access to in order to customize the type of results that you want to get back. But like I said, keeping this one really simple, we just want to search the web. All I'm going to do is keep it as is. And if I disconnect this real quick and we come in and test step, it's basically going to be searching Perplexity for how many stars are there in our galaxy. And then the AI model of Sonar is the one that's going to grab all of these 5 sources and it's going to answer us. And right here it says the Milky Way galaxy, which is our home galaxy, is estimated to contain between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. This range is due to the difficulty, blah, 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 blah. So that's basically how it was able to answer us because it used an AI model called Sonar. So now if we wanted to make this search a little bit more dynamic, we could basically plug this in, and you can see in here what I'm doing is I'm just setting a search term. So let's test this step. What happens is the output of this node is a research term. Then we could reference that variable of research term right in here in our actual body request to Perplexity. So I would delete this fixed message, which is how many stars are there in our galaxy. And all I would do is I'd drag in research term from the left, put it in between the 2 quotes, and now it's coming over dynamically as Anthropic latest developments. And all I'd have to do now is hit test step, and we will get an answer from Perplexity about Anthropic's recent developments. There we go, it just came back. We can see there's 5 different sources right here. It went to Anthropic, it went to YouTube, it went to TechCrunch. And what we get is that today, May 22nd, so real-time information, Claude Opus 4 was released. And that literally came out like 2 or 3 hours ago, so that's how we know this is searching the web in real time. And then all we'd have to do is have, maybe an AI model is changing our search term, or maybe we're pulling from a Google Sheet with a bunch of different topics we need to research. But whatever it is, as long as we are passing over that variable, this actual search result from Perplexity is going to change every single time. And that's the whole point of variables, right? They vary, they're dynamic. So I know that one was quick, but Perplexity is a super, super versatile tool and probably an API that you're going to be calling a ton of times. So just wanted to make sure I threw that in there. So Firecrawl is going to allow us to turn any website into LLM-ready data in a matter of seconds. And as you can see right here, it's also open source. So once you get over to Firecrawl, click on this button and you'll be able to get 500 free credits to play around with. As you can see, there's 4 different things we can do with Firecrawl. We can scrape, we can crawl, we can map, or we can do this new extract, which basically means we can give Firecrawl a URL and also a prompt like, can you please extract the company name and the services they offer and an icebreaker out of this URL. So there's some really cool use cases that we can do with Firecrawl. So in this video, we're going to be mainly looking at extract, but I'm also going to show you the difference between scrape and extract. And we're going to get into n8n and connect up so you can see how this works, but the playground is going to be a really good place to understand the difference between these different endpoints. All right, so for the sake of this video, this is the website we're going to be looking at. It's called Quotes to Scrape, and as you can see, it's got like 10 on this first page, and it also has different pages of different categories of quotes, and as you can see, if we click into them, there are different quotes. So what I'm going to do is go back to the main screen, and I'm going to copy the URL of this website, and we're going to go into n8n, we're going to open up a new node, which is going to be an HTTP request, and this is just to show you what a standard GET request to a static website looks like. So we're going to paste in the URL, hit test step, and on the right-hand side, we're going to get all the HTML back from the Quotes to Scrape website. Like I said, what we're looking at here is a nasty chunk of HTML. It's pretty hard for us to read, but basically what's going on here is this is the code that goes to the website in order to have it be styled in different fonts and different colors. So right here, what we're looking at is the entire first page of this website. So if we were to search for Harry, if I copy this, we go back into n8n and we Control F this, you can see there is the exact quote that has the word Harry. So everything from the website's in here, it's just wrapped up in kind of an ugly chunk of HTML. Now hopping back over to the Firecrawl playground using the scrape endpoint, we can replace that same URL, we'll run this, and it's going to output markdown formatting. So now we can see we actually have everything we're looking for with the different quotes, and it's a lot more readable for a human. So that's what a web scrape is, right? We get the information back, whether that's HTML or Markdown, but then we would typically feed that into some sort of LLM in order to extract the information we're looking for. In this case, we'd be looking for different quotes. But what we can do with extract is we can give it the URL and then also say, hey, get all of the quotes on here. And using this method, we can say not just these first 10 on this page. I want you to crawl through the whole site and basically get all of these quotes, all of these quotes, all of these quotes, all of these quotes. So it's going to be really cool. So I'm going to show how this works in Firecrawl, and then we're going to plug it into n8n. All right, so what we're doing here is we're saying extract all of the quotes and authors from this website. I gave it the website, and now what it's doing is it's going to generate the different parameters that the LLM will be looking to extract out of the content of the website. Okay, so here's the run we're about to execute. We have the URL, and then we have our schema for what the LLM is going to be looking for, and it's looking for text, which would be the quote, and it's a string, and then it's also going to be looking for the author of that quote, which is also a string. And then the prompt we're feeding here to the LLM is extract all quotes and their corresponding authors from the website. So we're going to hit run, and we're going to see that it's not only going to go to that first URL, it's basically going to take that main domain, which is quotes2scrape.com, and it's going to be crawling through the other sections of this website in order to come back and scrape all of the quotes on there. Also, quick plug, go ahead and use code HERC10 to get 10% off the first 12 months on your Firecrawl plan. Okay, so it just finished up. As you can see, we have 79 quotes. So down here we have a JSON response where it's going to be an object called quotes, and in there we have a bunch of different items, which is, text, author, text, author, text, author, and we have pretty much everything from that website now. Okay, cool. But what we want to do is look at how we can do this in n8n so that we have, a list of 20, 30, 40 URLs that we want to extract information from. We can just loop through and send off that automation rather than having to come in here and type that out in Firecrawl. Okay, so what we're going to do is go back into n8n, and I apologize because there may be some jumping around here, but we're basically just going to clear out this HTTP request and grab a new one. Now what we're going to do is we want to go into Firecrawl's documentation, so all we have to do is import the curl command for the extract endpoint rather than trying to figure out how to fill out these different parameters. So back in Firecrawl, once you set up your account, up in the top right, you'll see a button called Docs. You want to click into there, and now we can see a quick start guide. We have different endpoints, and what we're going to do is on the left, scroll down to Features and click on Extract, and this is what we're looking for. So we've got some information here. The first thing to look at is when we're using the extract, you can extract structured data from one or multiple URLs, including wildcards. So what we did was we didn't just scrape one single page. We basically scraped through all of the pages that had the main base domain of quotes2scrape.com or something like that. And if you put a asterisk after it, it's going to basically mean this is a wildcard, and it's going to go scrape all pages that are after it rather than just scraping this one predefined page. As you can see right here, it'll automatically crawl and parse all the URLs it can discover, then extract the requested data. And we can see that's how it works because if we come back into the request we just made, we can see right here that it added a slash with an asterisk after quotes2scrape.com. Okay, anyways, so what we're looking for here is this curl command. This is basically going to fill out the method, which is going to be a post request. It's going to fill out the endpoint, it'll fill out the content type, and it'll show us how to set up our authorization. And then we'll have a body request that we'll need to make some minor changes to. So in the top right, I'm going to click copy, and I'm going to come back into n8n, hit import curl, paste that in there, hit import, and as you can see, everything pretty much just got populated. So like I said, the method is going to be a post. We have the endpoint already set up, and what I want to do is show you guys how to set up this authorization so that we can keep it saved forever, rather than having to put it in here in the configuration panel every time. So first of all, head back over to your Firecrawl, go to API keys on the left-hand side, and you're just going to want to copy that API key. So once you have that copied, head back into n8n, and now let's look at how we actually set this up. So typically what you do is we have this as a header parameter. Not all authorizations are headers, but this one is a header. And the key or the name is authorization, and the value is bearer space your API key. So what you typically do is just paste in your API key right there, and you'd be good to go. But what we want to do is we want to save our Firecrawl credential the same way you'd save, a Google Sheets credential or a Slack credential. So we're going to come into authentication, click on generic. We're going to click on generic type and choose header because we know down here it's a header auth. And then you can see I have some other credentials already saved. We're going to create a new one. I'm just going to name this Firecrawl to keep ourselves organized. For the name, we're going to put authorization. And for the value, we're going to type bearer with a capital B space and then paste in our API key. And we'll hit save. And this is going to be the exact same thing that we just did down below, except for now we have it saved. So we can actually flick this field off. We don't need to send headers because we're sending them right here. And now we just need to figure out how to configure this body request. Okay, so I'm going to change this to an expression and open it up just so we can take a look at it. The first thing we notice is that by default there are 3 URLs in here that we would be extracting from. We don't want to do that here, so I'm going to grab everything within the array, but I'm going to keep the 2 quotation marks. And now all we need to do is put the URL that we're looking to extract information from in between these quotation marks. So here I just put in the quotes2scrape.com. But what we want to do, if you remember, is we want to put an asterisk after that so that it will go and crawl all of the pages, not just that first page, and which would only have like 9 or 10 quotes. And now the rest is going to be really easy to configure because we already did this in the playground, so we know exactly what goes where. So I'm going to click back into our playground example. First thing is, this is the quote that Firecrawl sent off. So I'm going to copy that, go back into n8n, and I'm just going to replace the prompts right here. We don't want the company mission, blah, blah, blah. We want to paste this in here, and we're looking to extract all quotes and their corresponding authors from the website. And then next is basically telling the LLM, what are you pulling back? So we just told it it's pulling back quotes and authors, so we need to actually make the schema down here in the body request match the prompt. So all we have to do is go back into our playground, Right here is the schema that we sent over in our example, and I'm just going to click on JSON view, and I'm going to copy this entire thing, which is wrapped up in curly braces. We'll come back into end-to-end, and we'll start after schema colon space, replace all this with what we just had in Firecrawl. And actually, I think I've noticed the way that this copied over, it's not going to work. So let me show you guys that real quick. If we hit test step, it's going to say JSON parameter needs to be valid JSON. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of this. Now I came into ChatGPT and I'm just saying fix this JSON. What it's going to do is it's going to just basically push these over. When you copy it over from Firecrawl, it kind of aligns them on the left, but you don't want that. So as you can see, it just basically pushed everything over. We'll copy this into our end-to-end right there, and all it did was bump everything over once, and now we should be good to go. So real quick, before we test this out, I'm just going to call this extract, and then we'll hit test step, and we should see that it's going to be polling, and it's going to give us a message that says true, and it gives us an ID. And so now what we need to do next is pull this ID back to see if our request has been fulfilled yet. So I'm back in the documentation, and now we are going to look at down here asynchronous extraction and status checking. So this is how we check the status of a request. As you saw, we just made one. So here I'm going to click on copy this curl command. We're going to come back into end-to-end, and we're going to add another HTTP request, and we're going to import that in there. And you can see this one is going to be a GET command. It's going to have a different endpoint. And what we need to do, if you look back at the documentation, is at the end of the extract slash, we have to put the extract ID that we're looking to check the status of. So back in end-to-end, the ID is going to be coming from the left-hand side, the previous node every time. So I'm just going to change the URL field to an expression, put a backslash, and then I'm going to grab the ID, pull it right in there, and we're good to go, except we need to set up our credential. And this is why it's great. We already set this up as a generic, as a header, and now we can just pull in easily our Firecrawl auth and hit test step. So what happens now is our request hasn't been done yet. So as you can see, it comes back as processing, and the data is an empty array. So what we're going to set up real quick is something called polling, where we're basically checking in on a specific ID, which is this one right here, and we're going to check, and if it's empty, if the data field is empty, then that means we're going to wait a certain amount of time and come back and try again. So after the request, I'm going to add a if. So this is just basically going to help us create our filter. So we're dragging in json.data, which as you can see is an empty array, and we're just going to say is empty. But one thing you have to keep in mind is this doesn't match. As you can see, we're dragging in an array, and we were trying to do a filter of a string. So we have to go to array and then say is empty. And we'll hit test step, and this is going to say true. The data field is empty. And so if true, what we want to do is we're going to add a wait, and this will wait for, let's, in this case, we'll just say 5 seconds. So if we hit test step, it's going to wait for 5 seconds. And I wish actually I switched the logic so that this would be on the bottom, but whatever. And then we would just drag this right back into here, and we would try it again. So now after 5 seconds had passed, or however much time, we would try this again. And now we can see that we have our item back, and the data field is no longer empty because we have our quotes object, which has 83 quotes. So it even got more than that time we did it in the playground. And I'm thinking this is just because, the extract is kind of still in beta, so it may not be super consistent, but that's still way better than if we were to just do a simple GET request. And then as you can see now, if we ran this next step, this would come out. But this is interesting. So before it knows what it's pulling back, the json.data field is an array. And so we were able to set up, is the array empty? But now it's an object. So we can't put it through the same filter because we're looking at a filter for an array. So what I'm thinking here is we could set up this continue using error output. So because this node would error, we could hit test step, and we could see now it's going to go down the false branch. And so this basically just means it's going to let us continue moving through the process, and we could do then whatever we want to do down here. Obviously this isn't perfect because I just set this up to show you guys and ran into that, but that's typically sort of the way we would think is how can we make this a little more dynamic, because it has to deal with empty arrays or potentially full objects. Anyways, what I wanted to show you guys now is back in our request, if we were to get rid of this asterisk, what would happen? So we're just going to run this whole process again. I'll hit test workflow, and now it's going to be sending that request only to, one URL rather than the other one. Aha, and I'm glad we are doing live testing because I made the mistake of putting this in as json.id, which doesn't exist if we're pulling from the wait node. So all we have to do in here is get rid of json.id and pull in basically a node reference variable. So we're going to do 2 curly braces. We're going to be pulling from the extract node, and now we just want to say item.json.id, and we should be good to go now. So I'm just going to refresh this, and we'll completely do it again. So test workflow, We're doing the exact same thing. It's not ready yet, so we're gonna wait 5 seconds and then we're gonna go check again. We hopefully should see, okay, it's not ready still, so we're gonna wait 5 more seconds, come check again, and then whenever it is ready, now as you can see, it goes down this branch, and we can see that we actually get our items back. And what you see here is that this time we only got 10 quotes. It says 9, but computers count from 0. But we only got 10 quotes because we didn't put an asterisk after the URL. So Firecrawl didn't know I need to go scrape everything out of this whole base URL. I'm only going to be scraping this one specific page, which is this one right here, which does in fact only have 10 quotes. And by the way, super simple template here, but if you want to try it out and just plug in your API key and different URLs, you can grab that in the Free School community. You'll hop in there, you will click on YouTube resources and click on the post associated with this video, and you'll have the JSON right there to download. Once you download that, all you have to do is import it from file right up here, and you'll have the workflow. So there's a lot of cool use cases for Firecrawl. It'd be cool to be able to pull from a sheet, for example, of 30 or 40 or 50 URLs that we want to run through and then update based on the results. You could do some really cool stuff here, like researching a ton of companies and then having it also create some initial outreach for you. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Firecrawl is a super cool tool. There's lots of functionality there, and there's lots of uses of AI in Firecrawl, which is awesome. But we're going to move into a different tool that you can use to scrape pretty much anything, which is called Apify, which has a ton of different actors, and you can scrape, like I said, almost anything. So let's go into the setup video. So Apify is like a marketplace for actors, which essentially let us scrape anything on the internet. As you can see right here, we're able to explore 4,500 plus pre-built actors for web scraping and automation. And it's really not that complicated. An actor is basically just a predefined script that was already built for us that we can just send off a certain request to. So you can think of it like a virtual assistant where you're saying, hey, I want to use the TikTok virtual assistant, and I want you to scrape, videos that have the hashtag of AI content. Or you could use the LinkedIn job scraper, and you could say, I want to find jobs that are titled business analyst. So there's just so many ways you could use Apify. You could get leads from Google Maps, you could get Instagram comments, you could get Facebook posts. There's just almost unlimited things you can do here. You can even tap into Apollo's database of leads and just get a ton. So today I'm just going to show you guys in N8N the easiest way to set up this Apify actor, where you're going to start the actor and then you're going to just grab those results. So what you're going to want to do is head over to Apify using the link in the description and then use code 30NateHerc to get 30% off. Okay, like I said, what we're going to be covering today is a 2-step process where you make one request to Apify to start up an actor, and then you're going to wait for it to finish up, and then you're just going to pull those results back in. So let me show you what that looks like. What I'm going to do is hit test workflow, and this is going to start the Google Maps actor. And what we're doing here is we're asking for dentists in New York. And then if I go to my Apify console and I go over here to actors and click on the Google Maps extractor one, if I click on runs, we can see that there's one currently finishing up right now. And now that it's finished, I can go back into our workflow. I can hook it up to the get results node, hit test step, and this is going to pull in those 50 dentists that we just scraped in New York. And you can see this contains information like their address, their website, their phone number, all this kind of stuff. So you can just basically scrape these lists of leads. So anyways, that's how this works, but let's walk through a live setup. So once you're in your Apify console, you click on the Apify store, and this is where you can see all of the different actors. And let's do an example of like a social media one. So I'm gonna click on this TikTok scraper since it's just the first one right here. And this may seem a little bit confusing, but it's not gonna be too bad at all. We get to basically do all this with natural language. So let me show you guys how this works. So basically, we have this configuration panel right here. When you open up any sort of actor, they won't always all be the same. But in this one, what we have is videos with this hashtag, so we can put something in. I put in AI content to play around with earlier. And then you can see it asks, how many videos do you want back? So in this case, I put 10. Let's just put 25 for the sake of this demo. And then you have the option to add more settings. So down here, we could do, we could add certain profiles that we want to scrape. We could add a different search functionality. We could even have it download the videos for us. So once you're good with this configuration, and just don't overcomplicate it, think of it the same way you would like put in filters on an e-commerce website, or the same way you would, fill in your order when you're door dashing some food. So now that we have this filled out the way we want it, all I'm going to do is come up to the top right and hit API and click API endpoints. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to use this endpoint called run actor. This is the one that's basically just going to send a request to Apify and start this process, but it's not going to give us the live results back. That's why the second step later is to pull the results back. What you could do is you could run the actor synchronously, meaning it's going to send it off and it's just going to spin in N8N until we're done and until it has the results. But I found this way to be more consistent. So anyways, all you have to do is click on copy, and it's already going to have copied over your Apify API key. So it's really, really simple. All we're going to do here is open up a new HTTP request. I'm going to just paste in that URL that we just copied right here. And that's basically all we have to do, except for we want to change this method to post, because as you can see right here, it says post. And so this is basically just us putting in the actor's phone number, and so we're giving it a call. But now what we have to do is actually tell it what we want. So right here, we've already filled this out. I'm gonna click on JSON, and all I have to do is just copy this JSON right here, go back into N8N, flick this on to send a body, and we wanna send over just JSON, and then all I have to do is paste that in there. So as you can see, what we're sending over to this TikTok scraper is I want AI content and I want 25 results, and then all this other stuff is false. So I'm just gonna hit test step. And so this basically returns us with an ID and says, okay, the actor has started. If we go back into here and we click on runs, we can see that this crawler is now running, and it's going to basically tell us how much it costed, how long it took, and all this kind of stuff. And now it's already done. So what we need to do now is we need to click on API up in the top right, click on API endpoints again, and scroll all the way down to the bottom where we can see get last run dataset items. So all I need to do is hit this copy button right here, go back into N8N, and then open up another HTTP request. And then I'm just going to paste that URL right in there once again. And I don't even have to change the method, because if we go in here, we can see that this is a get. So all I have to do is hit test step, and this is going to pull in those 25 results from our TikTok scrape based on the search term AI content. So you can see right here, it says 25 items. And just to show you guys that it really is 25 items, I'm just gonna grab a set field, and we're going to just drag in the actual text from here and hit test step. And it should, oh, we have to connect the trigger. So I'm just gonna move this trigger over here real quick. And what you can do is, because we already have our data here, I can just pin it so we don't actually have to run it again. But then I'll hit test step, and now we can see we're gonna get our 25 items right here, which are all of the text content. So I think just the captions or the titles of these TikToks. And we have all 25 TikToks, as you can see. So I just showed you guys the two-step method and why I've been using it, because here's an example where I did the synchronous run. So all I did was I came to the Google Maps and I went to API endpoints. And then I wanted to do run actor synchronously, which basically means that it would run it in N8N and it would spin until the results are done, and then it should feed back the output. So I copied that, I put it into here, and as you can see, I just ran it with the Google Maps looking for plumbers, and we got nothing back. So that's why we're taking this two-step approach, where as you can see here, we're gonna do that exact same request. We're doing a request for plumbers, and we're gonna fire this off. And so nothing came back in N8N, but if we go to our actor and we go to runs, we can see right here that this was the one that we just made for plumbers, and if we click into it, we can see all the plumbers. So that's why we're taking the two-step approach. I'm gonna make the exact same request here for New York plumbers, and what I'm gonna do is just run this workflow. And now I wanted to talk about what we have to do, because what happens is we started the actor, and as you can see, it's running right now, and then it went to grab the results, but the results aren't done yet. So that's why it comes back and says, this is an item, but it's empty. So what we wanna do is we wanna go to our runs and we wanna see how long this is taking on average for 50 leads. As you can see, the most amount of time it's ever taken was 19 seconds. So I'm just gonna go in here, and in between the start actor and grab results, I'm gonna add a wait. And I'm just gonna tell this thing to wait for 22 seconds just to be safe. And now what I'm gonna do is just run this thing again. It's gonna start the actor. It's gonna wait for 22 seconds. So if we go back into Appify, you can see that the actor is once again running. After about 22 seconds, it's gonna pass over, and then we should get all 50 results back in our HTTP request. There we go, just finished up, and now you can see that we have 50 items, which are all of the plumbers that we got in New York. So from here, now that you have these 50 leads, and remember, if you wanna come back into Appify and change up your input, you can change how many places you wanna extract. So if you change this to 200, and then you clicked on JSON and you copied in that body, you would now be searching for 200 results. But anyways, that's the hard part, is getting the leads into N8N. But now we have all this data about them, and we can just, do some research, send them off an email, whatever it is. We can just basically have this thing running 24/7. And if you wanted to make this workflow more advanced to handle a little bit more dynamic amount of results, what you'd want to use is a technique called polling. So basically you'd wait, you check in, and then if the results were all done, you continue down the process. But if they weren't all done, you would basically wait again and come back. And you would just loop through this until you're confident that all of the results are done. So that's gonna be it for this one. I'll have this template available in my free school community if you wanna play around with it. Just remember, you'll have to come in here and you'll have to switch out your own API key. And don't forget, when you get to Appify, you can use code 30NateHerc to get 30% off. Okay, so those were some APIs that we can use to actually scrape information. Now what if we wanna use APIs to generate some sort of content? We're gonna look at an image generation API from OpenAI, and we're gonna look at a video generation API called Runway. So these next two workflows will explain how you set up those API calls, and also how you can bake them into a workflow to be a little bit more practical. So let's take a look. So this workflow right here, all I had to do was enter an ROI on AI automation, and it was able to spit out this LinkedIn post for me. And if you look at this graphic, it's insane. It looks super professional. It even has a little LinkedIn logo in the corner. but it directly calls out the actual statistics that are in the post based on the research. And for this next one, all I typed in was mental health within the workplace, and it spit out this post. According to Deloitte Insights, organizations that support mental health can see up to 25% increase in productivity. And as you can see down here, it's just a beautiful graphic. So a few weeks ago when ChatGPT came out with their image generation model, you probably saw a lot of stuff on LinkedIn like this, where people were turning themselves into action figures, or some stuff like this, where people were turning themselves into Pixar animation style photos or whatever it is. And obviously I had to try this out myself. And of course, this was very cool and everyone was getting really excited. But then I started to think about how could this image generation model actually be used to save time for a marketing team? Because this new image model is actually good at spelling and it can make words that don't look like gibberish, it opens up a world of possibilities. So here's a really quick example of me giving it a 1-sentence prompt and it spits out a poster that looks pretty solid. Of course, we were limited to having to do this in ChatGPT and coming in here and typing, but now the API is released, so we can start to save hours and hours of time. And so the automation I'm going to show with you guys today is going to help you turn an idea into a fully researched LinkedIn post with a graphic as well. And of course, we're going to walk through setting up the HTTP request to OpenAI's image generation model. But what you can do is also download this entire template for free, and you can use it to post on LinkedIn, or you can also just kind of build on top of it to see how you can use image generation to save you hours and hours within some sort of marketing process. So this workflow right here, all I had to do was enter in ROI on AI automation, and it was able to spit out this LinkedIn post for me. And if you look at this graphic, it's insane. It looks super professional. It even has a little LinkedIn logo in the corner, but it directly calls out the actual statistics that are in the post based on the research. So 74% of organizations say their most advanced AI initiatives are meeting or exceeding ROI expectations right here. And on the other side, we can see that only 26% of companies have achieved significant AI-driven gains so far, which is right here. And I was just extremely impressed by this one. And for this next one, all I typed in was mental health within the workplace, and it spit out this post. According to Deloitte Insights, organizations that support mental health can see up to 25% increase in productivity. And as you can see down here, it's just a beautiful graphic. Something that would probably take me 20 minutes in Canva. And if you can now push out these posts in a minute rather than 20 minutes, you can start to push out more and more throughout the day and save hours every week. And because the post is being backed by research, the graphic is being backed by the research post, you're not polluting anything into the internet. A lot of people in my comments call it AI slop. Anyways, let's do a quick live run of this workflow and then I'll walk through step by step how to set up this API call. And as always, if you want to download this workflow for free, all you have to do is join my free school community. Link is down in the description. And then you can search for the title of the video. You can go into YouTube resources. You need to find the post associated with this video. And then when you're in there, you'll be able to download this JSON file, and that is the template. So you download the JSON file, you'll go back into N8N, you'll open up a new workflow, and in the top right, you'll go to import from file, import that JSON file, and then there'll be a little sticky note with a setup guide, just sort of telling you what you need to plug in to get this thing to work for you. Okay, quick disclaimer though, I'm not actually going to post this to LinkedIn. You certainly could, but I'm just going to basically send the post as well as the attachment to my email because I don't want to post on LinkedIn right now. Anyways, as you can see here, this workflow is starting with a form submission. So if I hit test workflow, it's going to pop up with a form where we have to enter in our email for the workflow to send us the results, topic of the post, and then also I threw in here a target audience. So you could have these posts be kind of flavored towards a specific audience if you want to. Okay, so this form is waiting for us. I put in my email, I put the topic of morning versus night people, and the target audience is working adults. So we'll hit submit, close out of here, and we'll see the LinkedIn post agent is going to start up. It's using Tavily here for research, and it's going to create that post and then pass the post on to the image prompt agent. And that image prompt agent is going to read the post and basically create a prompt to feed into OpenAI's image generator. And as you can see, it's doing that right now. We're going to get that back as a base 64 string, and then we're just converting that to binary so we can actually post that on LinkedIn or send that in email as an attachment. And we'll break down all these steps, but let's just wait and see what these results look like here. Okay, so all that just finished up. Let me pop over to email. So in email, we got our new LinkedIn post. Are you a morning lark or a night owl? The science of productivity. I'm not going to read through this right now exactly, but let's take a look at the image we got. When are you most productive? In the morning, plus 10% productivity, or night owls thrive in flexibility. I mean, this is insane. This is a really good graphic. Okay, so now that we've seen again how good this is, let's just break down what's going on. We're going to start off with the LinkedIn post agent. All we're doing is we're feeding in two things from the form submission, which was what is the topic of the post, as well as who's the target audience. So right here you can see morning versus night people and working adults. And then we move into the actual system prompt, which I'm not going to read through this entire thing. If you download the template, the prompt will be in there for you to look at. But basically, I told it you are an AI agent specialized in creating professional, educational, and engaging LinkedIn posts based on a topic provided by the user. We told it that it has a tool called Tavily that it will use to search the web and gather accurate information, and that the post should be written to appeal to the provided target audience. And then basically just some more information about how to structure the post, what it should output, and then an example, which is basically you receive a topic, you search the web, you draft the post, and you format it with source citations, clean structure, optional hashtags, and a call to action at the end. And as you can see, what it outputs is a super clean LinkedIn post right here. So then what we're going to do is basically we're feeding this output directly into that next agent. And by the way, they're both using ChatGPT 4.1 through OpenRouter. All right, but before we look at the image prompt agent, let's just take a look at these two things down here. So the first one is the chat model. That plugs into both image prompt agent and the LinkedIn post agent. So all you have to do is go to OpenRouter, get an API key, and then you can choose from all these different models. And in here, I'm using GPT 4.1. And then we have the actual tool that the LinkedIn agent uses for its research, which is Tavily. And what we're doing here is we're sending off a post request using an HTTP request tool to the Tavily endpoint. So this is where people typically start to feel overwhelmed when trying to set up these requests, because it can be confusing when you're trying to look through that API documentation, which is exactly why in my paid community I created a APIs and HTTP requests deep dive, because truthfully you need to understand how to set up these requests, because being able to connect to different APIs is where the magic really happens. So Tavily just lets your LLM connect to the web, and it's really good for web search, and it also gives you 1,000 free searches per month. So that's the plan that I'm on. Anyways, once you're in here and you have an account and you get an API key, all I did was went to the Tavily search endpoint, and you can see we have a curl statement right here where we have this endpoint, we have post as the method, we have this is how we authorize ourselves, and this is all going to be pretty similar to the way that we set up the actual request to OpenAI's image generation API. So I'm not going to dive into this too much. When you download this template, all you have to do is plug in your Tavily API, but later in this video when we walk through setting up the request to OpenAI, this should make more sense. Anyways, the main thing to take away from this tool is that we're using a placeholder for the request. Because in the request we send over to Tavily, we basically say, okay, here's the search query that we're going to search the internet for. And then we have all these other little settings we can tweak, like the topic, how many results, how many chunks per source, all this kind of stuff. All we really want to touch right now is the query. And as you can see, I put this in curly braces, meaning it's a placeholder. I'm calling the placeholder search term. And down here, I'm defining that placeholder as what the user is searching for. So as you can see, this data in the placeholder is going to be filled in by the model. So based on our form submission, when we asked it to, create a LinkedIn post about morning versus night people, it fills out the search term with latest research on productivity, morning people versus night people, and that's basically how it searches the internet. And then we get our results back, and now it creates a LinkedIn post that we're ready to pass off to the next agent. So the output of this one gets fed into this next one, which all it has to do is read the output. As you can see right here, we gave it the LinkedIn post, which is the full one that we just got spit out. And then our system message is basically telling it to turn that into an image prompt. This one is a little bit longer, not too bad though. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially we're telling it that it's going to be an AI agent that transforms a LinkedIn post into a visual image prompt for a text to image AI generation model. So we told it to read the post, identify the message, identify the takeaways, and then create a compelling graphic prompt that can be used with a text to image generator. We gave it some output instructions, like, if there's numbers, try to work those into the prompt. You can use, text, charts, icons, shapes, overlays, anything like that. And then the very bottom here, we just gave it sort of like an example prompt format. And you can see what it spits out is a image prompt. So it says a dynamic split screen infographic, style graphic. Left side has a sunrise, it's bright yellow, and it has morning larks plus 10% productivity. And the right side is a morning night sky, cool blue gradients, a crescent moon, all this kind of stuff. And that is exactly what we saw back in here when we look at our image. And so this is just so cool to me because first of all, I think it's really cool that it can read a post and kind of use its brain to say, okay, this would be a good, graphic to be looking at while I'm reading this post. But then on top of that, it can actually just go create that for us. So I think this stuff is super cool. I remember back in September, I was working on a project where someone wanted me to help them with LinkedIn automated posting, and they wanted visual elements as well. And I was like, I don't know, that might have to be a couple month away thing when we have some better models. And now we're here. So it's just super exciting to see. But anyways, now we're going to feed that output, the image prompt, into the HTTP request to OpenAI. So real quick, let's go take a look at OpenAI's documentation. So, of course, we have the GPT image API, which lets you create, edit, and transform images. You've got different styles, of course. You can do like memes with text. You can do creative things. You can turn other images into different images. You can do all this kind of stuff. And this is where it gets really cool. These posters and the visuals with words, because that's this kind of stuff where typically AI image gen just like wasn't there yet. And one thing real quick, in your OpenAI account, which is different than your ChatGPT account, this is where you add the billing for your OpenAI API calls. You have to have your organization verified in order to actually be able to access this model through API right now. It took me 2 minutes. You basically just have to submit an ID and it has to verify that you're human, and then you'll be verified and then you can use it. Otherwise, you're going to get an error message that looks like this that I got earlier today. But anyways, the verification process does not take too long. Anyways, then you're going to head over to the API documentation that I will have linked in the description, where we can see how we can actually create an image in N8N. So we're going to dive deeper into this documentation in the later part of this video, where I'm walking through a step-by-step setup of this. But we're using the endpoint, which is going to create an image. So we have this URL right here. We're going to be creating a post request. And then we just obviously have our things that we have to configure, like the prompt in the body. We have to obviously send over some sort of API key. We have to, we can choose the size, we can choose the model, all this kind of stuff. So back in N8N, you can see that I'm sending a post request to that endpoint. For the headers, I set up my API key right here, but I'm going to show you guys a better way to do that in the later part of this video. And then for the body, we're saying, okay, I want to use the GPT image model. Here's the actual prompt to use for the image, which we dragged in from the image prompt agent. And then finally, the size, we just left it as that 1024 times 1024 square image. And so this is interesting because what we get back is we get back a massive base 64 code. Like, this thing is huge. I can't even scroll right now. My screen's kind of frozen. Anyways, yeah, there it goes. It just kind of lagged. But we got back this massive file. We can see how many tokens this was. And then what we're going to do is we're going to convert that to binary data. So that's how we can actually get the file as an image. As you can see now, after we turn that nasty string into a file, we have the binary image right over here. So all I did was I basically just dragged in this field right here with that nasty string. And then when you hit test step, you'll get that binary data. And then from there, you have the binary data. You have the LinkedIn post. All you have to do is, activate LinkedIn, drag it right in there. Or you can just do what I did, which is I'm sending it to myself in email. And of course, before you guys yell at me, let's just talk about how much this run costed me. So this was 4,273 tokens. And if we look at this API and we go down to the pricing section, we can see that for image output tokens, which was generated images, it's going to be $40 for 1 million tokens, which comes out to about 17 cents. If you can see that right here. Hopefully I did the math right. But really, for the quality and kind of for the industry standard I've seen for price, that's on the cheaper end. And as you can see down here, it translates roughly to 2 cents, 7 cents, 19 cents per generated image for low, medium, blah, 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 blah. But anyways, now that that's out of the way, let's just set up an HTTP request to that API and generate an image. So I'm going to add a first step. I'm just going to grab an HTTP request. So I'm just going to head over to the actual API documentation from OpenAI on how to create an image and how to hit this endpoint. And all we're going to do is we're going to copy this curl command over here on the right. If you're not seeing a curl command, if you're seeing Python, just change that to curl, copy that, and then we're going to go back into N8N, hit import curl, paste that in there, and then once we hit import, we're almost done. So that curl statement basically just auto-populated almost everything we need to do. Now we just have a few minor tweaks, but as you can see, it changed the method to post. It gave us the correct URL endpoint already. It has us sending a header, which is our authorization, and then it has our body parameters filled out, where all we really have to change here is the prompt. And if we wanted to, we can customize this kind of stuff. And that's why it's going to be really helpful to be able to understand and read API documentation so you know how to customize these different requests. Basically, all of these little things here, like prompt, background, model, N, output format, they're just little levers that you can pull and tweak in order to change your output. But we're not going to dive too deep into that right now. Let's just see how we can create an image. Anyways, before we grab our API key and plug that in, when you're in your OpenAI account, make sure that your organization is verified. Otherwise, you're going to get this error message and it's not going to let you access the model. It doesn't take long, just submit an ID. And then also make sure that you have billing information set up so you can actually pay for an image. But then you're going to go down here to API keys. You're going to create new secret key. This one's going to be called image test just for now. And then you're going to copy that API key. Now back in N8N, it has this already set up for us where all we need to do is delete all this. We're going to keep the space after bear and we can paste in our API key like that and we're good to go. But if you want a better method to be able to save this key in N8N so you don't have to go find it every time, what you can do is come to authentication, go to general, or actually no, it's generic. And then you're gonna choose header auth. And we know it's header because right here we're sending headers as a header parameter, and this is where we're authorizing ourselves. So we're just gonna do the same up here with the header auth, and then we're gonna create a new one. I'm just gonna call this one OpenAI image, just so we can keep ourselves organized. And then you're gonna do the same thing as what we saw down in that header parameter field, meaning the authorization is the name, and then the value was bearer space API key. So that's all I'm gonna do. I'm gonna hit save. We are now authorized to access this endpoint, and I'm just gonna turn off sending headers because we're technically sending headers right up here with our authentication. So we should be good now. Right now we'll be getting an image of a cute baby sea otter, and I'm just gonna say making pancakes, and we'll hit test step, and this should be running right now. Okay, so bad request, please check your parameters. Invalid type for N. It expected an integer, but it got a string instead. So if you go back to the API documentation, we can see N right here. It should be integer or null, and it's also optional. So I'm just gonna delete that. We don't really need that. And I'm gonna hit test step. And while that's running real quick, we'll just go back at N, and this basically says the number of images to generate must be between 1 and 10. So that's like one of those little levers you could tweak, like I was talking about, if you want to customize your request. But right now, by default, it's only going to give us 1. Looks like this HTTP request is working. So I'll check in with you guys in 20 seconds when this is done. Okay, so now that finished up, didn't take too long. We have a few things, and all we really need is this base 64. But we can see, again, this one costed around 17 cents. And now we just have to turn this into binary so we can actually view an image. So I'm gonna add a plus after the HTTP request. I'm just gonna type in binary, and we can see convert to file, which is gonna convert JSON data to binary data. And all we wanna do here is move a base 64 string to file, because this is a base 64 JSON, and this basically represents the image. So I'm gonna drag that into there. And then when I hit test step, we should be getting a binary image output in a field called data, as you can see right here. And this should be our image of a cute sea otter making pancakes. As you can see, it's not super realistic, and that's because the prompt didn't have any like photorealistic, hyper-realistic elements in there, but you can easily make it do so. And of course, I was playing around with this earlier, and just to show you guys, you can make some pretty cool realistic images. Here was a post I made about if ancient Rome had access to iPhones, and obviously this is not like a real Twitter account, but this is if dinosaurs evolved into modern day influencers. This was just for me testing like an automation using this API and auto posting, but not as practical as like these LinkedIn graphics. But if you guys want to see a video sort of like this, let me know. Or if you also want to see a more evolved version of the LinkedIn posting flow and how we can make it even more robust and even more automated, then definitely let me know about that as well. Okay, so all I have to do in this form submission is enter in a picture of a product, enter in the product name, the product description, and my email address. And we'll send this off, and we'll see the workflow over here start to fire off. So we're gonna upload the photo, we're gonna get an image prompt, we're gonna download that photo. Now we're creating a professional graphic. So after our image has been generated, we're uploading it to an API to get a public URL so we can feed that URL of the image into Runway to generate a professional video. Now we're gonna wait 30 seconds, and then we'll check in to see if the video's done. If it's not done yet, we're gonna come down here and poll, wait 5 more seconds, and then go check in, and we're gonna do this infinitely until our video is actually done. So anyways, it just finished up. It ended up hitting this check 8 times, which indicates I should probably increase the wait time over here. But anyways, let's go look at our finished products. So we just got this new email. Here are the requested marketing materials for your toothpaste. So first let's look at the video because I think that's more exciting. So let me open up this link. Wow, we got a 10-second video. It's spinning, it's 3D. The lighting is changing. This looks awesome. And then of course, it also sends us that image in case we want to use that as well. And one of the steps in the workflow is that it's going to upload your original image to your Google Drive. So here you can see this was the original, and then this was the finished product. So now that you guys have seen a demo, we're going to build this entire workflow step by step. So stick with me because by the end of this video, you'll have this exact system up and running. Okay, so when we're setting up a system where we're creating an image from text, and then we're creating a video from that image, the 2 most important things are going to be that image prompt and that video prompt. So what we're going to do is head over to my school community. The link for that will be down in the description. It's a free school community. And then what you're going to do is either search for the title of this video or click on YouTube resources and find the post associated with this video. And when you click into there, there'll be a doc that will look like this or a PDF, and it will have the 2 prompts that you'll need in order to run this system. So head over there, get that doc, and then we can hop into the step-by-step. And that way we can start to build this workflow, and you guys will have the prompts to plug right in. Cool. So once you have those, let's get started on the workflow. So as you guys know, a workflow always has to start with some sort of trigger. So in this case, we're going to be triggering this workflow with a form submission. So I'm just going to grab the native N8N form on new form event. So we're going to configure what this form is going to look like and what it's going to prompt a user to input. And then whenever someone actually submits a response, that's when the workflow is going to fire off. Okay, so I'm going to leave the authentication as none. The form title, I'm just putting go to market. For the form description, I'm going to say, give us a product photo, title, and description, and we'll get back to you with professional marketing materials. And if you guys are interested in what I just used to dictate that text, there'll be a link for Whisperflow down in the description. And now we need to add our form elements. So the first one is going to be not a text. We're going to have them actually submit a file. So click on file. This is going to be required. I only want them to be allowed to upload one file, so I'm going to switch off multiple files. And then for the field name, we're just going to say product photo. Okay, so now we're going to add another one, which is going to be the product title. So I'm just going to write product title. This is going to be text. For placeholder, let's just put toothpaste since that was the example. This will be a required field. So the placeholder is just going to be the gray text that fills in the text box. So people are they know what to put in. Okay, we're adding another one called product description. We'll make this one required. We'll just leave the placeholder blank because you don't need it. And then finally, what we need to get from them is an email, but instead of doing text, we can actually make it require a valid email address. So I'm just going to call it email, and we'll just say like name@example.com so they know what a valid email looks like. We'll make that required because we have to send them an email at the end with their materials. And now we should be good to go. So if I hit test step, we'll see that it's going to open up a form submission and it has everything that we just configured. And now let me put in some sample data real quick. Okay, so I put a picture of a cologne bottle. The title is cologne. I said the cologne smells very clean and fresh, and it's a very sophisticated scent because we're going to have that description be used to sort of help create that text to image prompt. And then I just put my email. So I'm going to submit this form. We should see that we're going to get data back right here in our N8N, which is the binary photo. This is the product photo that I just submitted. And then we have our actual table of information like the title, the description, and the email. And so when I'm building stuff step by step, what I like to do is I get the data in here, and then I pretty much will just build node by node, testing the data all the way through, making sure that nothing's going to break when variables are being passed from left to right in this workflow. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is we have this binary data in here, and binary data is tough to reference later. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to upload it straight to our Google Drive so we can pull that in later when we need it to actually edit that image. Okay, so that's our form trigger. That's what starts the workflow. And now what we're going to do next is we want to upload that original image to Google Drive so we can pull it in later and then use it to edit the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the plus. I'm going to type in Google Drive, and we're going to grab a Google Drive operation that is going to be upload file. So I'll click on upload file. And at this point, you need to connect your Google Drive. So I'm not going to walk through that step by step, but I have a video right up here where I do walk through it step by step. But basically, you're just going to go to Docs. You have to open up a sort of Google Cloud profile or a console, and then you just have to connect yourself and enable the right credentials and APIs. But like I said, that video will walk through it. Anyways, now what we're doing is we have to upload the binary field right here to our Google Drive. So it's not called data. We can see over here it's called product photo. So I'm just going to copy and paste that right there. So it's going to be looking for that product photo. And then we have to give it a name. So that's why we had the person submit a title. So all I'm going to do is for the name, I'm going to make this an expression instead of fixed because this name is going to change based on the actual product coming through. I'm going to drag in the product title from the left right here. So now the photo in Google Drive is going to be called cologne. And then I'm just going to, in parentheses, say original. So because this is an expression, it basically means whenever someone submits a form, whatever the title is, it's going to be title and then it's going to say original. And that's how we sort of control that to be dynamic. Anyways, then I'm just choosing what folder to go in. So in my drive, I'm going to choose it to go to a folder that I just made called product creatives. So once we have that configured, I'm going to hit test step. We're going to wait for this to spin. It means that it's trying to upload it right now. And then once we get that success message, we'll quickly go to our Google Drive and make sure that the image is actually there. So there we go, it just came back. And now I'm going to click into Google Drive, click out of the toothpaste, and we can see we have cologne. And that is the image that we just submitted in N8N. All right, now that we've done that, what we want to do is we want to feed the data into an AI node so that it can create a text-to-image prompt. So I'm going to click on the plus. I'm going to grab an AI agent. And before we do anything in here, I'm first of all going to give it its brain. So I'm going to click on the plus under chat model. I'm personally going to grab an open router chat model, which basically lets you connect to a ton of different things. Let me see, openrouter.ai. It basically lets you connect your agents to all the different models. So if I click on models up here, we can see that it just lets you connect to Gemini, Anthropic, OpenAI, DeepSeek. It has all these models and all in one place. So go to OpenRouter, get an API key, and then once you come back into here, all you have to do is connect your API key. And what I'm going to use here is going to be 4.1. And then I'm just going to name this so we know which one I'm using here. And then we now have our agent accessing GPT 4.1. Okay, so now you're going to go to that PDF that I have in the Skool community, and you're just going to copy this product photography prompt, grab that, go back to the AI agent, and then you're going to click on add option, add a system message, and then we're basically just going to, I'm going to click on expression and expand this full screen so you guys can see it better, but I'm just going to paste that prompt in here, and this is going to tell the AI agent how to take what we're giving it and turn it into a text-to-image optimized prompt for professional style, studio photography. So we're not done yet because we have to actually give it the dynamic information from our form submission every time. So that's a user message. That's basically what it's going to look at. So the user message is what the agent's going to look at every time. And the system message is basically like, here are your instructions. So for the user message, we're not going to be using a connected chat trigger node. We're going to define below. And when we want to make sure that this changes every time, we have to make sure it's an expression. And then I'm just going to drill down over here to the form submission. And I'm going to say, okay, here's what we're going to give this agent. It's going to get the product, which the person submitted to us in the form, and we can drag in the product, which was cologne, as you can see on the right. And then they also gave us a description. So all I have to do now is drag in the product description. And so now every time the agent will be looking at whatever product and description that the user submitted in order to create its prompt. So I'm going to hit test step. We'll see right now it's using its chat model, GPT 4.1. And it's already created that prompt for us, so let's just give it a quick read. Hyper-realistic photo of sophisticated cologne bottle, transparent glass, sleek minimalistic design, silver metal cap, all this. But what we have to do is we have to make sure that the image isn't being created just on this. It has to look at this, but it also has to look at the actual original image. So that's why our next step is going to be to re-download this file, and then we're going to push it over to the image generation model. So at this point, you may be wondering, like, why are we going to upload the file if we're just going to download it again? And the reason why I had to do that is because when we get the file in the form of binary, we want to send the binary data into the HTTP request right here that actually generates the image. And we can't reference the binary way over here if it's only coming through over here. So we upload it so that we can then download it and then send it right back in. And so if that doesn't make sense yet, it probably will once we get over to this stage, but that's why. Anyways, next step is we're going to download that file. So I'm going to click on this plus. We're going to be downloading it from Google Drive. And we're going to be using the operation download file. So we already should be connected because we've set up our Google credentials already. The operation is going to be download the resource as a file. And instead of choosing from a list, we're going to choose by ID. And all we're going to do is download that file that we previously uploaded every time. So I'm going to come over here, the Google Drive upload photo node, drag in the ID, and now we can see that's all we have to do. If we hit test step, we'll get back that file that we originally uploaded, and we can just make sure it's the cologne bottle. Okay, but now it's time to basically use that downloaded file and the image prompt and send that over to an API that's going to create an image for us. So we're going to be using OpenAI's image generator. So here is the documentation. We have the ability to create an image, or we can create an image edit, which is what we want to do because we want it to look at the photo and our request. So typically what you can do in this documentation is you can copy the curl command, but this curl command is actually broken, so we're not going to do that. If you copied this one up here to actually just create an image, that one would work fine, but there's like a bug with this one right now. So anyways, I'm going to go into our N8N, I'm going to hit the plus, I'm going to grab an HTTP request, and now we're going to configure this request. So I'm going to walk through how I'm reading the API documentation right here to set this up. I'm not going to go super in depth, but if you get confused along the way, then definitely check out my paid course. The link for that's down in the description. I've got a full course on deep diving into APIs and HTTP requests. Anyways, the first thing we see is we're going to be making a post request to this endpoint. So the first thing I'm going to do is copy this endpoint. We're going to paste that in, and then we're also going to make sure the method is set to post. So the next thing that we have to do is authorize ourselves somehow. So over here I can see that we have a header, and the name is going to be authorization, and then the value is going to be bearer space our OpenAI key. So that's why I set up a header authentication already. So in authentication, I went to generic, and then I went to header. And then you can see I have a bunch of different headers already set up. But what I did here is I chose my OpenAI one, where basically all I did was I typed in here authorization, and then in the value, I typed in bearer space, and then I pasted my API key in there. And now I have my OpenAI credential saved forever. Okay, so the first thing we have to do in our body request over to OpenAI is we have to send over the image to edit. So that's going to be in a field called image, and then we're sending over the actual photo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on send body. I'm going to use form data, and now we can set up the different names and values to send over. So the first thing is we're going to send over this image right here on the left-hand side. And this is in a field called data, and it's binary. So I'm going to choose, instead of form data, I'm going to send over an N8N binary file. The name is going to be image because that's what it said in the documentation. And the input data field name is data. So I'm just going to copy that, paste it in there. And this basically means, okay, we're sending over this picture. The next thing we need to send over is a prompt. So the name of this field is going to be prompt. I'm just going to copy that, add a new parameter, and call it prompt. And then for the value, we want to send over the prompt that we had our AI agent write. So I'm going to click into schema, and I'm just going to drag over the output from the AI agent right there, and now that's an expression. So the next thing we want to send over is what model do we want to use? Because if we don't put this in, it's going to default to DALL-E 2, but we want to use GPT-image-1. So I'm going to copy GPT-image-1. We're going to come back into here, and I'm going to paste that in as the value, but then the name is model, because as you can see in here, right there, it says model. So hopefully you guys can see that when we're sending over an API call, we just have all of these different options where we can sort of tweak different settings to change the way that we get the output back. And then you have some other options, of course, like quality or size. But right now, we're just going to leave all that as default and just go with these three things to keep it simple. And I'm going to hit test step, and we'll see if this is working. Okay, never mind. I got an error, and I was like, okay, I think I did everything right. The reason I got the error is because I don't have any more credits. So if you get this error, go add some credits. Okay, so added more credits. I'm going to try this again, and I'll check back in. But before I do that, I wanted to say, clearly, I've been like spamming this thing with creating images because it's so cool, it's so fun. But everyone else in the world has also been doing that. So if you're ever getting some sort of like errors where it's like a 500 type of error where it means like something's going on the server side of things, or you're seeing like some sort of rate limit stuff, keep in mind that there's a limit on how many images you can send per minute. I don't think that's been clearly defined on GPT-image-1. But also, if the OpenAI server is receiving way too many requests, that is also another reason why your request may be failing. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so now it worked. We just got that back. But what you'll notice is we don't see an image here or like an image URL. So what we have to do is we have this base64 string, and we have to turn that into binary data. So what I'm going to do is after this node, I'm going to add one that says convert to file. So we're going to convert JSON data to binary data, and we're going to do base64. So all I have to do now is show this data on the left-hand side, grab the base64 string, and then when we hit test step, we should get a binary file over here, which if we click into it, this should be our professional looking photo. Wow, that looks great. It even got the wording and like the same fonts right. So that's awesome. And by the way, if we click into the results of the create image where we did the image edit, we can see the tokens. And with this model, it is basically $10 for a million input tokens and $40 for a million output tokens. So right here, you can see the difference between our input and output tokens. And this one was pretty cheap. I think it was like 5 cents. Anyways, now that we have that image right here as binary data, we need to turn that into a video using an API called Runway. And so if we go into Runway and we go, first of all, let's look at the price. For a 5-second video, 25 cents. For a 10-second video, 50 cents. So that's the one we're going to be doing today. But if we go to the API reference to read how we can turn an image into a video, what we need to look at is how we actually send over that image. And what we have to do here is send over an HTTPS URL of the image. So we somehow have to get this binary data in N8N to a public image that Runway can access. So the way I'm going to be doing that is with this API that's free called ImageBB. And it's a free image hosting service. And what we can do is basically just use its API to send over the binary data, and we'll get back a public URL. So come here, make a free account. You'll grab your API key from up top. And then we basically have, here's how we set this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the endpoint right there. We're going to go back into N8N, and I'm going to add an HTTP request. And let me just configure this up. We'll put it over here just to keep everything sort of square. But now what I'm going to do in here is paste that endpoint in as our URL. You can also see that it says this call can be done using post or get, but since get requests are limited by the maximum amount of length, you should probably do post. So I'm just going to go back in here and change this to a post. And then there are basically two things that are required. The first one is our API key, and then the second one is the actual image. Anyways, this documentation is not super intuitive. I can sort of tell that this is a query parameter because it's being attached at the end of the endpoint with a question mark and all this kind of stuff, and that's just because I've looked at tons of API documentation. So what I'm going to do is go into N8N. We're going to add a generic credential type. It's going to be a query auth. Where it was query, there we go. And then you can see I've already added my image BB. But all you're going to do is you would add the name as a key, and then you would just paste in your API key, and that's it. And now we've authenticated ourselves to this service. And then what's next is we need to send over the image in a field called image. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to send over a body because this allows us to actually send over n8n binary fields. And I'm not going to do n8n binary. I'm going to do form data because then we can name the field we're sending over. Like I said, I'm not going to deep dive into how that all works, but the name is going to be image, and then the input data field name is going to be data because that's how it's seen over here. And this should be it. So real quick, I'm just going to change this to get URL, and then we're going to hit test step, which is going to send over that binary data to image BB, and it hopefully should be sending us back a URL. And it sent back 3 of them. I'm going to be using the middle one that's just called URL because it's like the best size and everything. You can look at the other ones if you want on your end. But this one is going to load up, and we should see it's the image that we got generated for us. It takes a while to load up on that first time. But as you can see, now it's a publicly accessible URL, and then we can feed it into Runway. So that's exactly our next step. We're going to add another request right here. It's going to be an HTTP, and this one we're going to configure to hit Runway. So here's a good example of we can actually use a curl command. So I'm going to click on copy over here when I'm in the Runway, generate a video from image, come back into n8n, hit import curl, and paste that in there and hit import. And this is going to basically configure everything we need. We just have to tweak a few things. Typically, most API documentation nowadays will have a curl command. The edit image one that we set up earlier was just a little broken. ImageBB is just a free service, so sometimes they don't always, but let's configure this node. So the first thing I see is we have a header auth right here, and I don't want to send it like this. I want to send it up as a generic type so I can save it. Otherwise, you'd have to go get your API key every time you wanted to use Runway. So as you can see, I've already set up my Runway API key, so I have it plugged in. But what you would do is you'd go get your API key from Runway, and then you'd see, okay, how do we actually send over authentication? It comes through with the name authorization, and then the header is bearer space API key. So similar to the last one. And then that's all you would do in here when you're setting up your Runway credential, authorization, bearer space, my API key. And then because we have ourselves authenticated up here, we can flick off that headers, and all we have to do now is configure the actual body. Okay, so first things first, what image are we sending over to get turned into a video? In that name prompt image, we're going to get rid of that value, and I'm just going to drag in the URL that we wanted, that we got from earlier, which was that picture I showed you guys. So now Runway sees that image. Next, we have the seed, which if you want to look at the documentation, you can play with it, but I'm just going to get rid of that. Then we have the model, which we're going to be using Gen 4 Turbo. We then have the prompt text. So this is where we're going to get rid of this. And you're going to go back to that PDF you downloaded from my free school, and you're going to paste this prompt in there. So this prompt basically gives us that like 3D spinning effect where it just kind of does a slow pan and a slow rotate. And that's what I was looking for. If you're wanting some other type of video, then you can tweak that prompt, of course. For the duration, if you look in the documentation, it'll say the duration only basically allows 5 or 10. So I'm just going to change this one to 10. And then the last one was ratio, and I'm just going to make the square. So here are the accepted ratio values. I'm going to copy 960 by 960, and we're just going to paste that in right there. And actually, before we hit test step, I've realized that we're missing something here. So back in the documentation, we can see that there's one thing up here which is required, which is a header, x-runway-version, and then we need to set the value to this. So I'm going to copy the header, and we have to enable headers. I deleted it earlier, but we're going to enable that. So we have the version, and then I'm just going to go copy the value that it needs to be set to, and we'll paste that in there as the value. Otherwise, this would not have worked. Okay, so that should be configured, but before we test it out, I want to show you guys how I set up the polling flow like this that you saw in the demo. So what we're going to do here is we need to go see like, okay, once we send over our request right here to get a video from our image, it's going to return an ID. And that doesn't mean anything to us. So what we have to do is get our task. So that is basically we send over the ID that it gives us, and then it'll come back and say like the status equals pending or running, or it will say completed. So what I'm going to do is copy this curl command for getting task details. We're going to hook it up to this node as an HTTP request. We're going to import that curl. And now that's pretty much set up. We have our authorization, which I'm going to delete that because, as you know, we just configured that earlier as a header auth. So I'm just going to come in here and grab my Runway API key. There it is. I couldn't find it for some reason. We have the version set up, and now all we have to do is drag in the actual ID from the previous one. So real quick, I'm just going to make this an expression, delete ID, and now we're pretty much set up. So First of all, I'm going to test this one, which is going to send off that request to Runway and say, hey, here's our image, here's the prompt, make a video out of it. And as you can see, we got back an ID. Now I'm going to use this next node and I'm going to drag in that ID from earlier. And now it's saying, okay, we're going to check in on the status of this specific task. And if I hit test step, what we're going to see is that it's not yet finished. So it's going to come back and say, okay, status of this run or status of this task is running. So that's why what I'm going to do is add an if. And this if is going to be saying, okay, does this status field right here, does that equal running in all caps? Because that's what it equals right now. If yes, what we're going to do is we are going to basically wait for a certain amount of time. So here's the true branch. I'm going to wait, and let's just say it's 5 seconds. So I'll just call this 5 seconds. I'm going to wait for 5 seconds, and then I'm going to come back here and try again. So as you saw in the demo, it basically tried again like 7 or 8 times. And this just ensures that it's never going to move on until we actually have a finished photo. So what you could also do is basically say, does status equal completed, or whatever it means when it completes. That's another way to do it. You just have to be careful to make sure that whatever you're setting here as the check is always 100% going to work. And then what you do is you would continue the rest of the logic down this path once that check has been complete. And then of course, you probably don't want to have this check like 10 times every single time. So what you would do is you would add a wait step here. And once you know about how long it takes, you'd add this here. So last time I had it at 30 seconds and it waited like 8 times. So let's just say I'm going to wait 60 seconds here. So then when this flow actually runs, it'll wait for a minute, check. If it's still not done, it'll continuously loop through here and wait 5 seconds every time until we're done. Okay, there we go. So now status is succeeded. And what I'm going to do is just view this video real quick. Hopefully this one came out nicely. Let's take a look. Wow, this is awesome. Super clean. It's rotating really slowly. It's a full 10-second video. You can tell it's like a 3D image. This is awesome. Okay, cool. So now if we test this if branch, we'll see that it's going to go down the other one, which is the false branch, because it's actually completed. And now we can, with confidence, shoot off the email with our materials. So I'm going to grab a Gmail node. I'm going to click send a message. And we are going to have this configured, hopefully, because you've already set up your Google stuff. And now, who do we send this to? We're going to go grab that email from the original form submission, which is all the way down here. We're going to make the subject, which I'm just going to say marketing materials, and then a colon, and we'll just drag in the actual title of the product, which in here was cologne. I'm changing the email type to text just because I want to. We're going to make the body an expression, and we're just going to say like, hey, here is your photo. And obviously this can be customized however you want. But for the photo, what we have to do is grab that public URL that we generated earlier. So right here, there is the photo URL. Here is your video. And for the video, we're going to drag in the URL we just got from the output of that Runway get task check. So there is the video URL. And then I'm just going to say, cheers. Last thing I want to do is down here, append n8n attribution and turn that off. This just ensures that the email doesn't say this email was sent by n8n. And now if we hit test step right here, this is pretty much the end of the process. And we can go ahead and check. Okay, so not authorized. Let me fix that real quick. Okay, so I just switched my credential because I was using one that had expired. So now this should go through and we'll go take a look at the email. Okay, so did something wrong. I can already tell what happened is this is supposed to be an expression and dynamically come through as the title of the product, but we accidentally somehow left off a curly brace. So if I come back into here and add one more curly brace right here to the description, or sorry, the subject, now we should be good. I'll hit test step again, and now we'll go take a look at that email. Okay, there we go. Now we have the cologne and we have our photo and our video. So let's click into the video real quick. I'm just so amazed. This is just so much fun. It looked the lighting and the reflections, it's all just perfect. And then we'll click into the photo just in case we want to see the actual image, and there it is. This also looks awesome. All right, so that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this style of walking step by step through some of the API calls and sort of my thought process as to how I set up this workflow. Okay, at this point, I think you guys probably have a really good understanding of how these AI workflows actually function, and you're probably getting a little bit antsy and want to build an actual AI agent now. So we're about to get into building your first AI agent step by step, but before that, just wanted to drive home the concept of AI workflows versus AI agents one more time and the benefits of using workflows. But of course, there are scenarios where you do need to use an agent. So let's break it down real quick. Everyone is talking about AI agents right now, but the truth is, most people are using them completely wrong, and admittedly, myself included. It's such a buzzword right now, and it's really cool in N8N to visually see your agents think about which tools they have and which ones to call. So a lot of people are just kind of forcing AI agents into processes where you don't really need it. But in reality, a simple AI workflow is not only going to be easier to build, it's going to be more cost effective and also more reliable in the long run. If you guys don't know me, my name's Nate, and for a while now I've been running an agency where we deliver AI solutions to clients, and I've also been teaching people from any background how to build out these things practically and apply them to their business through deep dive courses as well as live calls. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely check out the community with the link in the description, but let's get into the video. So we're going to get into N8N, and I'm going to show you guys some mistakes of when I've built agents when I should have been building AI workflows. But before that, I just wanted to lay out the foundations here. So we all know what ChatGPT is. At its core, it's a large language model that we talk to with an input, and then it basically just gives us an output. So if we wanted to leverage ChatGPT to help us write a blog post, we would ask it to write a blog post about a certain topic, it would do that, and then it would give us the output, which we would then just copy and paste somewhere else. And then came the birth of AI agents, which is when we actually were able to give tools to our LLMs so that they could not only just generate content for us, but they could actually go post it or go do whatever we wanted to do with it. AI agents are great, and there's definitely a time and a place for them because they have different tools, and basically the agent will use its brain to understand, okay, I have these 3 tools. Based on what the user is asking me, do I call this one and then do I output, or do I call this one, then this one, or do I need to call all 3 simultaneously? It has that option, and it has the variability there. So this is going to be a non-deterministic workflow. But the reality is most of the processes that we're trying to enhance for our clients are pretty deterministic workflows that we can build out with something more linear, where we still have the same tools, we're still using AI, but we have everything going step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6, which is going to reduce the variability there. It's going to be very deterministic, and it's going to help us with a lot of things. So stick with me because I'm going to show you guys an AI agent video that I made on YouTube a few months back, and I started reevaluating and like, why would I ever build out the system like that? It's so inefficient. So I'll show you guys that in a sec. But real quick, let's talk about the pros of AI workflows over AI agents, and I narrowed it down to 4 main points. The first one is reliability and consistency. One of the most important concepts of building an effective AI agent is the system prompt, because it has to understand what its tools are, when to use each one, and what the end goal is, and it's on its own to figure out which ones do I need to call in order to provide a good output. But with a workflow, we're basically keeping it on track, and there's no way that the process can sort of deviate from the guardrails that we've set up, because it has to happen in order, and it can't really go anywhere else. So this makes systems more reliable because there's never going to be a transfer of data between workflows where things may get messed up, or incorrect mappings being sent across, agent to a different agent or agent to tool. We're just basically able to go through the process linearly. So the next one is going to be cost efficiency. When we're using an agent and it has different tools, every time it hits a tool, it's going to go back to its brain, it's going to rerun through its system prompt, and it's going to think about what is my next step here. And every time you're accessing that AI agent's brain, it costs you money. So if we're able to eliminate that aspect of decision making and just say, okay, you finished step 2, now you have to go on to step 3. There's no decision to be made. We don't have to make that extra API call to think about what comes next, and we're saving money. Number 3 is easier debugging and maintenance. When we have an AI workflow, we can see exactly which node errors, we can see exactly what mappings are incorrect and what happened here, whereas with an AI agent workflow, it's a little bit tougher because there's a lot of manipulating the system prompt and messing with different tool configurations. And like I said, there's data flowing between agent to tool or between agent to sub workflow, and that's where a lot of things can happen that you don't really have full visibility into. And then the final one is scalability, kind of backpacks right off of number 3. But if you wanted to add more nodes and more functionality to a workflow, it's as simple as, plugging in a few more blocks here and there or adding on to the back. But when you want to increase the functionality of an AI agent, you're probably going to have to give it more tools. And when you give it more tools, you're going to have to refine and add more lines to the system prompt, which could work great initially, but then previous functionality, the first couple tools you added, those might stop working, or those may become less consistent. So basically, the more control that we have over the entire workflow, the better. AI is great. There are times when we need to make decisions and we need that little bit of flexibility. But if a decision doesn't have to be made, why would we leave that up to the AI to hallucinate 5 or 10% of the time when we could basically say, hey, this is going to be 100% consistent? Anyways, I've made a video that talks a little bit more about this stuff as well as other things I've learned over the first 6 months of building agents. If you want to watch that, I'll link it up here. But let's hop into N8N and take a look at some real examples. Okay, so the first example I want to share with you guys is a typical sort of RAG agent. And for some reason, it always seems like the element of RAG has to be associated with an agent, but it really doesn't. So what we have is a workflow where we're putting a document from Google Drive into Pinecone. We have a customer support agent, and then we have a customer support AI workflow. And both of the blue box and the green box, they do the exact same thing, but this one's gonna be more efficient, and we also have more control. So let's break this down. Also, if you wanna download this template to play around with, you can get it for free if you go to my free school community. The link for that's down in the description as well. You'll come into here, click on YouTube resources, and click on the post associated with this video, and then the workflow will be right here for you to download. Okay, so anyways, here is the document that we're going to be looking at. It has policy and FAQ information. We've already put it into Pinecone, as you can see. It's created 8 vectors. And now what we're going to do is we're going to fire off an email to the customer support agent to see how it handles it. Okay, so we just sent off, do you offer price matching or bulk discounts? We'll come back into the workflow, hit run, and we should see the customer support agent is hitting the vector database, and it's also hitting its reply email tool. But what you'll notice is that it hit its brain. So Google Gemini 2.0 Flash, in this case, not a huge deal because it's free. But if you were using something else, it's going to have hit that API 3 different times, which would be 3 separate costs. So let's check and see if it did this correctly. So in our email, we got the reply, we do not offer price matching currently, but we do run promotions and discounts regularly. Yes, bulk orders may qualify for a discount. Please contact our sales team at salestechhaven.com for inquiries. So let's go validate that that's correct. So in the FAQ section of this doc, we have that they don't offer price matching, but they do run promotions and discounts regularly. And then for bulk discounts, you have to hit up the sales team. So it answered correctly. Okay, so now we're gonna run the customer support AI workflow down here. It's gonna grab the email, it's gonna search Pinecone, it's going to write the email, I'll explain what's going on here in a sec, and then it responds to the customer. So there's 4 steps here. It's gonna be an email trigger, it's gonna search the knowledge base, it's gonna write the email, and then respond to the customer in an email. So why would we leave that up to the agent to decide what it needs to do if it's always going to happen in those 4 steps every time? All right, here's the email we just got in reply. As you can see, this is the one that the agent wrote, and this one looks a lot better. Hello, thank you for reaching out to us. In response to your inquiry, we currently do not offer price matching. However, we do regularly run promotions and discounts, so be sure to keep an eye out for those. That's accurate. Regarding bulk discounts, yes, they may indeed qualify for a discount, so reach out to our sales team. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. Best regards, Mr. Helpful, Tech Haven, and obviously I told it to sign off like that. So now that we've seen that, let's actually break down what's going on. So it's the same trigger, we're getting an email, and as you can see, we can find the text of the email right here, which was, do you guys offer price matching or bulk discounts? We're feeding that into a Pinecone node, so if you guys didn't know, you don't even need these to be only tools, you can have them just be nodes, or we're searching for the prompts, that is, do you guys offer price matching or bulk discounts? And maybe you might want an AI step between the trigger and the search to maybe formulate a query out of the email if the email is pretty long. But in this case, that's all we did. And now we can see we got those 4 vectors back, same way we would have with the agent. But what's cool is we have a lot more control over it. So as you can see, we have a vector and then we have a score, which basically ranks how relevant the vector was to the query that we sent off. And so we have some pretty low ones over here. But what we can do is say, okay, we only want to keep if the score is greater than 0.4. So it's only going to be keeping these 2, as you can see, and it's getting rid of these 2 that aren't super relevant. And this is something that's a lot easier to control in this linear flow compared to having the agent try to filter through vector results up here. Anyways, then we're just aggregating however many results it pulls back. If it's 4, if it's 3, or if it's just 1, it's still just going to aggregate them together so that we can feed it into our OpenAI node that's going to write the email. So basically in the user prompt, we said, okay, here's the customer inquiry, here's the original email, and here's the relevant knowledge that we found. All you have to do now is write an email. And so by giving this AI node just one specific goal, it's going to be more quality and consistent with its outputs rather than we gave the agent multiple jobs. It had to not only write the email, but it also had to figure out how to search through information and figure out what the next step was. So this node, it only has to focus on one thing. It has the knowledge handed to it on a silver platter to write the email with. And basically we said, you're Mr. Helpful, a customer support rep for Tech Haven. Your job is to respond to incoming customer emails with accurate information from the knowledge base. You must only answer using relevant knowledge provided to you. Don't make anything up. We gave it the tone, and then we said only output the body in a clean format. It outputs that body, and then all it had to do was map in the correct message ID and the correct message content. Simple as that. So I hope this makes sense. Obviously, it's a lot cooler to watch the agent do something like that up here, but this is basically the exact same flow, and I would argue that it's going to be a lot better, more consistent, and cheaper. Okay, so now to show an example where I released this as a YouTube video, and a couple weeks later I was like, why did I do it like that? So what we have here is a technical analyst. And so basically we're talking to it through Telegram, and it has one tool, which is basically going to get a chart image, and then it's going to analyze the chart image, and then it sends it back to us in Telegram. And this is the workflow that it's actually calling right here, where we're making an HTTP request to chart-image, We're getting the chart, downloading it, analyzing the image, sending it back, and then responding back to the agent. So there's basically like 2 transfers of data here that we don't need. Because as you can see down here, we have the exact same process as one simple AI workflow. So there's going to be much, much less room for error here. But first of all, let's demo how this works, and then we'll demo the actual AI workflow. Okay, so it should be listening to us now. I'm going to ask it to analyze Microsoft, and as you can see, it's now hitting that tool. We won't see this workflow actually in real time just because it's like calling a different execution, but this is the workflow that it's calling down here. I can actually it's basically calling this right here. So what it's going to do is it's going to send us an image, and then a second or two later, it's going to send us an actual analysis. So there is Microsoft's stock chart, and now it's creating that analysis as you can see right up here, and then it's going to send us that analysis. We just got it. So if you want to see the full video that I made on YouTube, I'll tag it right up here, but not going to dive too much into what's actually happening. I just want to prove that we can do the exact same thing down here with a simple workflow. Although right here I did evolve this workflow a little bit, so it's not only looking at NASDAQ, but it can also choose different exchanges and feed that into the API call. But anyways, let's make this trigger down here active, and let's just show off that we can do the exact same thing with the workflow, and it's going to be better. So test workflow, this should be listening to us now. I'm just going to ask it to, we'll do a different one, analyze Bank of America. So now it's getting it. It is going to be downloading the chart. I actually want to open up Telegram so we can see downloading the chart, analyzing the image. It's going to send us that image, and then pretty much immediately after, it should be able to send us that analysis. So we don't have that awkward 2 to 5 second wait. Obviously, we're waiting here, but as soon as this is done, we should get both the image and the text simultaneously. There you go. And so you can see the results are basically the same, but this one is just going to be more consistent. There's no transfer of data between workflow. There's no need to hit an AI model to decide what tool I need to use. It is just going to be one seamless flow. You can also get this workflow in the Free School community if you want to play around with it. Just wanted to throw that out there. Anyways, that's going to wrap us up here. I just wanted to close off with, this isn't me bashing on AI agents. Well, I guess a little bit it was. AI agents are super powerful. They're super cool. It's really important to learn prompt engineering and giving them different tools, but it's just about understanding, am I forcing an agent into something that doesn't need it? Am I